Good morning, everybody. Before we get into today's episode, let's talk briefly about the sponsors that make the podcast possible. This episode is brought to you by Omax Cryo Freeze, which is essentially roll-on CBD. Living with chronic pain sucks. It's more than a feeling of discomfort, and it can affect your entire life. And a lot of the listeners probably have some type of pain that has prevented them from relaxing or sleeping, or both, or stopped them from exercising. Perhaps it's been ongoing for a few weeks now and hasn't improved with any of the treatments that you've previously tried. I train jiu-jitsu quite often. Trust me, I'm familiar with soreness. So, if that sounds like you and you're looking to get rid of nagging muscle and joint pain almost immediately while providing a lasting recovery, then you need to try the natural breakthrough pain relief solution, CryoFreeze CBD Roll-On, developed by Omax Health. This is a non-prescription triple-action pain relief roll-on specifically formulated to block pain receptors, reduce inflammation, and improve muscle and joint flexibility. The best part? This 100% natural CBD-powered remedy works its magic within 10 minutes of application, and relief lasts for up to 8 hours, much longer than traditional over-the-counter products. Anybody from athletes to grandma can benefit from this immediate pain relief. You have pain that won't go away, then you qualify for Omax CryoFreeze. Simply roll it over where it hurts and ice the pain out. No messy creams or horrible fragrances like some of those other products. Works within 10 minutes of application, improving physical training, recovery, and performance. Go to omaxhealth.com and enter the code ClearedHot to get 20% off CryoFreeze and everything else site-wide. This product is the real deal. Go to Omax, OMAXhealth.com and enter the code ClearedHot to get 20% off and everything on the site. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. And what I'll say is that I am getting messages, not daily, but weekly for sure, about people asking specifically about this service. If there is something interfering with your happiness or it's preventing you from achieving your goals, whatever it may be, stress, struggle, strife, personal relationship, BetterHelp is here to help you, and they're going to assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating with this person in under 48 hours. It is important to realize this is not a crisis line, and it's also not self-help. This is professional counseling done securely online. There is a broad range of expertise available, which may not be locally available to you, and it's available for clients worldwide because it's hosted on the internet. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor, and you're going to get a timely and thoughtful response. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so you don't ever have to sit in a waiting room if that makes you feel uncomfortable. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. Personal side note, I have found that the effectiveness of counseling is based off the connection you have with the person you're speaking to. Don't give up on the process. Just find the right person so you can have that connection. BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. Visit betterhelp.com/clearedhot. That's better, H-E-L-P as in papa, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. For the podcast listeners, 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/clearedhot. This episode is also brought to you by Element, a tasty and what I'm going to call refreshing electrolyte drink mix designed to support active hydration and a healthy lifestyle. I'm very fortunate to call one of the creators, Rob Wolf, a close friend. And honestly, go back to the episode I did directly with him and we talked about this, but it's an amazing product. It has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to get you feeling and performing your best. Plus, it has zero sugar, artificial ingredients, or other junk that you're not going to want. Now, when it comes to performance, the best performers in the world are currently using Element. I am talking about the Team USA weightlifting, NBA teams, NFL teams, the Navy SEALs, and the list goes on and on and on. Element can help you expand your limits. If you want more energy while you're low-carb dieting or intermittent fasting, or you want to crush your next workout, or even your next workday, it has the electrolytes to help make this happen. There are a variety of delicious flavors, so you're going to be guaranteed to find one that your taste buds are going to love. The watermelon salt is delightful, but my current favorite is their new grapefruit. They also have some that are what I'm going to call spicy. And what I'll say is this: if you open the spicy one, keep it away from your face, okay? Do not let it go up your nose, but they're great in cocktails. Element potentially has the best return policy on the planet. If you don't love it, you're just going to be instantly refunded. No issues, no questions asked. So, if what I'm talking about sounds good to you, go to drinklmnt.com/clearedhot and use the promo code ClearedHot. hot. I highly recommend this product. I use it every single day. Last but certainly not least, let's talk about shaving your balls. That's right. What's the point of really polishing your flagpole if the gardening at the base of the pole is just a mess and out of control? That's right. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the only men's brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming with their newest product, the Lawnmower 4.0. The fourth-generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. You might ask yourself, how is this Lawnmower 4.0 different from other trimmers? Well, I'm glad you asked. The upgraded trimmer includes a multi-function on-off switch that can engage a travel lock because nothing's worse than having your trimmer go off in your carry-on luggage or your check baggage for the entire flight. And it gives you the ability to turn on a 4000K LED spotlight. You can turn it on and off when you need that precision shave. I guess you could shave in the closet at pitch black if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you can shave your balls in the dark now. And it allows you to customize your trim through additional guard lengths, sizes 1 through 4. The new wireless charging system uses electromagnetic induction, which can help battery length last longer. And you could also pair this with some of their other amazing products, like Cologne, Crop Mop Ball Wipes, Crop Reviver Ball Toner, and Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code CLEAREDHOT at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com using the code CLEAREDHOT. Let's tighten up those packages, gentlemen. Manscaped.com, code CLEAREDHOT. And that's all on the business side of the house. My guest today is Cara the Huntress. I was looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. My introduction to her came through her boss, actually. I had Nick McKinley on the podcast, and we talked about all things Deliver Fund, which is an anti-human trafficking organization. Inside of that organization, they have some amazing people who are daily duking it out in the trenches of this battle against human traffickers. One of those people is Cara. She is one of Deliver Fund's senior targeting analysts. She hunts human traffickers on the internet, and I'm not even going to attempt to describe exactly what she does and how she does it because she gets into that. But what I will say is this. I hate these people. And having conversations with people like Nick or Cara, it lights a fire under my ass, and I want to do something about it. And I hope that listening to this episode motivates you to want to do something about this as well. If you do, I have put a link in the bottom of the show notes directly to the Deliver Fund website. Get involved and do something about these pieces of shit. Episode number 191 with Cara the Huntress. Enjoy.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Think smarter, not harder. Well, I'm not capable of the former, but I am of the latter. So I focus on that generally. Cara the Huntress.
That's me.
How do we find ourselves here at this table?
Oh man, that's a wild ride.
Turn this sucker off.
Yeah, let me share him.
Yeah, what a fascinating world. So I would almost say, before people listen to this episode, because I know we're going to talk about human trafficking, I'd say go backwards and listen to the one where Nick McKinley was on. I don't know the number, but it was within the last few months, so it should be easily searchable. But it lays out the foundation for all things Deliver Fund. I would say the why, not all of the who. I went up to the office and met some more of the who. We'll just leave that behind the curtains. And the how, not a lot of the how, which is what sucks about this episode. Because I want to know exactly how you do what you do, but I don't want other people, like the people that you're after, to know how you do what you do.
We'll take, once the mics turn off, I'll give you a little more like behind the scenes because you would completely understand it with your background.
Well, I'm fascinated by it, and I want people to know about it, but it's literally this razor's edge. I want them to know enough about it so they get, I'm going to say pissed and motivated. But if you give them too much, maybe the wrong people, the internet is an interesting thing. Perhaps the wrong people could listen to this episode. I don't want them to know.
Well, I hope they do listen to the episode so they know what's coming for them.
You and I are going to get along well.
I believe so.
All right. Where did it all begin for you?
Where did it all begin? Gosh, I guess for what I do now today, how did it lead all up?
Let's take it all the way back.
All the
way back machine. Where the hell are you from?
I'm from California.
So am I. Where in California?
I grew up in Big Bear Lake in Southern
Really?
California. Yeah, I went to middle school and high school in Big Bear.
What was your class size?
Oh, God. Well, it started around 250. I don't think it graduated with that. I think it graduated like around maybe 125, 135. I didn't go to my senior year of high school.
Where were you?
I went on what now would be distance learning. I went on to an independent study program.
So you quit in the classroom school?
Yeah, because I was so badly bullied.
Really?
So, yeah, I was immensely bullied and treated really, really badly in high school. I just couldn't stand the other people I was around for the most part. There's a few that I really do care and love for, like they're really great friends still, but I liked to work. Like my dad got me working when I was 12 years old because in California, you can get a work permit when you're 12. And so he's like, all right, you're going to bus tables at the ski area. I'm like, okay. And so I had this work ethic that was instilled in me from a very young age. And I'm like, I can make money. My senior year of high school is worthless anyways in my mind. I'm like, in my mind, I was going into the military. So I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to get the requirements out of the way, get my high school diploma, and move on.
Or equivalent. That's the small asterisk.
But I actually did get my high school diploma. Like it says Big Bear High School. So it was through a program where you went once a week, you picked up your assignments from a teacher, you did all your assignments, and that was it.
I think some people thrive in that environment as opposed to the brick and mortar school system. And I say that I have 3 kids, all teenagers at this point, which is another earth-shattering revelation for me in and of itself. They all tolerate the traditional school system very differently. My oldest, it's not a good fit for him. He describes it as being in the chair and the process itself as fingers on a chalkboard.
I feel like for some people, and probably your son, it's just like everything moves too slow.
Or he's just wholeheartedly not interested in some of the subjects, which I can't. I mean, if I do my absolute best to be honest with my kids, and I think back, I'm like, listen, the most important class I ever took was typing, because I type every single day, and I hated it at the moment. And I had 2 buddies. It was their mom who taught the class, and I resisted it, and I type every single day. It has saved me tens of years, probably, of hunting and pecking. So I love that. And then math and English. A lot of the other stuff, I didn't know how to balance a checkbook. I didn't understand insurance. I didn't understand finances. I get it. However, get your ass to school if you're listening to this, Riley. So, or figure out a solution to get to the end state. If that's a wicket, high school or the equivalent, get it done.
Yeah, no. And so like I graduated high school. I had gone into the delayed entry program like 3 or 4 months before I even graduated high school. I'm like, I'm going into the Air Force. So
how'd you pick the Air Force?
My brother had chosen the Air Force first, and he is 6 years older than me. And in 2000, gosh, when was that? Was it 2004? So I went and visited him over in Milden Hall. He was a flight engineer on the Pavlos before they were retired, and then he moved over to the CV-22s. And so he was still on the Pavlos when I went and saw him in Milden Hall, and he was living off base. And we had to
luxurious,
right? He was married, so he could live off base.
Oh, yes.
And we had to drive like 45 minutes to get to base. And if you hit a train, you were there for like another hour. And he had the discussion with me. He's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I have the grades to go to college, no problem. But I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to go into debt.
Yeah.
He's like, just join the Air Force. And he's like, I'll tell you how to speak through it all with your recruiters so you don't get stuck in a dumb job. Like, go into the Air Force, right? And then his next word of advice, he's like, and then stay away from the PJs.
Fair and accurate.
I remember specifically like that moment where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to join the Air Force. And I wanted to go into intelligence.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, all right. And when I did that and went through all the steps through MEPS tried to tell me I was blind and I couldn't do any of the jobs I wanted to do. I had no depth perception, all this. I like put my foot down. I'm like, I'm not signing anything. And
Do you have depth perception?
I do.
Okay.
They're just really bad at their job.
Well,
sometimes.
I mean, we've both been through there.
Yeah.
Would you agree that perhaps an unfair characterization, but also accurate, would be it's like processing cattle through? It's not as if you're getting an incredible amount of quality time with the doctors that you're seeing. It's like next.
Yeah, so it took some time, but I settled for like put down 5 jobs that you want, whichever comes up first, you'll get it. It still took a year for the job to come up.
Really?
That they had availability to send me off to basic training, which was 1 and 2 SIGINT analyst. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but okay. And I went and read the description for it. And it's like, you're going to learn Morse code and how to do this with signals. I'm like, Morse code? What?
That sounds like a slightly outdated job description.
Yeah. Well, it was like probably 15 years back anyways, but I was like, okay, sure. So I went into the Air Force as a SIGINT analyst, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. Signals
Intelligence, for those of you listening.
Yes.
And that is the end of my knowledge and what they actually do.
That's the thing is,
I know what it is called. I have absolutely no idea exactly what they do.
SIGINT has such a broad spectrum. It's anything that has electronic like signals that are used and breaking them down and deciphering them in any way, shape, or form. So any like electronic emissions that you could like hack into and things like that. But it goes
We used
from
them for targeting, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
didn't understand the wizardry that was going on in the little equipment that they were using.
Yeah, I didn't either, even when they taught me, and I didn't like that. And so I always was like, I was always manipulating my way when I was in the Air Force into doing something that I thought was more satisfying to work on. And so like career managers in the Air Force, because we have career managers in the Air Force, would be like, well, we have these slots open and you came here to Fort Meade. I got this slot, and this slot open. And I'm like, oh, I want that slot. Can you put me in there? And it's like, it's a career killer. And I'm like, I'm not staying in. Like, I'm going to take the training you're going to give me, and I'm going to go contract. Because
it's very interesting how they will describe certain occupations like that to try to ward you off from skill sets that I would describe as pretty amazing. Like, oh, that'll kill your career. It's like, but will it?
Yeah.
But will it?
Will it? Right. And so, when I decided to go into the Air Force, the big draw of not only just like the competence of my brother telling me what to do at that point, but I was over in England. I'm like, oh, I'm going to travel. I'm like, that would be so awesome. I want to travel, right? And so I get into the Air Force. I go through a year of training. It took a year to get through all the intelligence training. And I get stationed in Ohio.
The hotbed of intelligence, signals-based.
So NASIC, the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, is at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. And so I was doing SIGINT there. And at the very, very, very first opportunity, I'm like, I'll deploy. Like, please.
What type of signals intelligence were you doing there? Or you guys, I'm assuming, well, that was probably just your garrison post, I would imagine.
No, everything was done there at NASIC. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there. I can't speak specifics on it. I think that actually would give up like classified mission stuff.
I'm surprised that the military is able to do any SIGINT CONUS, though. Continental United States.
So
aren't there laws preventing such things?
There's laws on collecting against United States citizens.
Yes.
And collecting, but once something is collected, it can be exploited, and everything that like mission based, like there isn't just SIGINT in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like everybody uses phones, everybody uses whatever it may be to transfer information. And so like when you're targeting different enemies, you can work all of that, no problem.
Kind
anywhere
of from
in
wherever.
the world.
Okay.
Anywhere in the world.
All right.
Yeah.
Just making sure you guys aren't targeting citizens. All right.
No.
There's other There's other federal agencies for that.
It's so that drives me crazy. And the first question is, I'm like, well, what are you trying to hide? No. My second question is, if like you're not that interesting. Like,
True. I'm gonna play devil's advocate on that one though. I think that I personally, like, that would be my response to him. Like, listen, if you want to be so bored out of your mind, you could go through every piece of signals intelligence that I have as a person. But it's easy to say, and me saying that should never strip anybody else's rights of their privacy. So although it's easy to say, well, I have nothing to hide, the reality is, I should have the ability to hide something from the government if I want to. I'm not saying that I advocate that, but I do believe that privacy is a massive and very serious conversation that should never be forgotten, because I don't think most people realize how much of their privacy has actually been reduced. Patriot Act probably being one of the biggest levers to do so.
I agree. And, I think like every mission I ever worked on, it never touched any U.S. citizen information. Yeah. And then
unless they were overseas doing shit they shouldn't have been doing.
No, even then I wasn't allowed to touch it. And
really?
So, yes. And it was browbeaten into you, like quarterly training. If you come across what you believe may be this, like there's massive procedures that take place that go up the chain of command. I mean, later on in my career, when I worked with the FBI, like I further understood like the FISA process and all of the different warrants and things like that. And it is not easy. It is not easy at all. Despite, whatever you hear out on the news and you listen to what have happened, like it's not easy to get.
There's been shortcomings along the way. I feel like, and this is just based off of my peripheral knowledge, and it is actually, it's a subject that I like to know about. I could know more, but God damn it, what was his name? Citizen 4, the movie. Who are we talking about? What's his name? He lives in Russia now. Damn it. He's been on Rogan's podcast like twice.
What's his face? With the glasses.
Yes, Edward Snowden. Okay. That should not have taken. Should not have taken me that long. I've read his book, which of course is his version, and I've read other books, and there's of course the government's version. I do feel like there was a time where it got a little bit out of control, where those FISA warrants were a rubber stamp, and the veil of secrecy or national security might have been cloaked a little bit too tightly. I mean, let's be honest. If you give the government power, I think it's only a matter of time until they start to abuse it in some ways. So I think it should be kept in check.
All we have to do is look around for the last year. So.
Yeah, it's that's a very interesting real-time example of that. It's an interesting topic. I really do believe that the individual's right for privacy is paramount, but I also believe that the government needs to have some level of ability to have some forewarning. And I don't know where that balance is, but I know it has to exist. So I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I turn to you for answers like that.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't have the answer. When it comes to how the government does things, I don't think that... we have a sanity level. We don't know those answers.
The one thing that makes me feel warm inside and I worry a little bit less is that I have interfaced with the alphabet soup, if you will, of government agencies, and goddamn, they are not what you see in the movies.
Not at all.
Let's just say that I'm sometimes, like I said, it warms my heart to know that the government is far less capable in many ways than most people give them credit for.
It's actually a little terrifying at times when you realize.
Well, when you pull back the curtain and you think that you're going to see Jason Bourne, but what you see is a donkey with the fly buzzing around his head, you go, oh, shit. Now some of these other things make sense.
Just a little bit.
Yes.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Before we go into your Air Force career and the FBI career and your time beyond that, I want to go back to your high school days because you mentioned that you were bullied terribly. And this is something, I mean, I don't remember it being the issue. Not that it wasn't an issue for some people. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to it when I went to high school, but it is something that I have heard a lot more about now. And the impact that it has is lifelong. I mean, I've known you now for like 10 minutes, but I suspect, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that maybe what happened to you or how you were treated in high school might be a little bit of the driving and motivating factor for what you do now.
Absolutely. Like when I will say bad people do bad things or they break the rules or do things that hurt others, they should be held accountable for their actions.
When did it start for you, the bullying?
Bullying? Man, like I feel like I was even bullied in elementary school. I think kids pick on each other.
Yeah, like, kids are terrible. They sharpen their teeth on other kids. Some of them, though, like there's good-natured ribbing, and young men specifically are fucking horrendous. The things that will come out of our mouths and the interaction, but a lot of times it can be brushed off. But there's a difference between that and targeted bullying, which I have now My daughter will struggle with it a little bit, and it oftentimes seems like it's directed more towards females than it is males. That's completely anecdotal. I have no evidence to support that, but I'm curious the impact that it had on your life. And when you were going through that, did anybody step in to help you?
No, nobody did. Like, even my friends, they just watched it happen. Like, sometimes they would be like, knock it off to the person or whatever. And it just continued all the time. And I couldn't stand it. Like, my car got urinated on and trash thrown on it. I got shoved against lockers. I had food thrown in my hair. My house was egged and toilet papered all the time. And, within the world of social media, you connect with all these people again at some point, and I ask them because I want to know why. And the first thing they usually do is apologize profusely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was a terrible person. I should never have treated you that way. I'm like, it's fine. I mean, like,
that's a good first sign.
Yeah. And then I ask why. And their response was, you're just the person to pick on. Like, my parents didn't have a lot of money, and when you live in a resort town and you don't have a lot of money, you are an automatic target because you're the poor person.
You're the outlier.
And, you can't even break into the school sports because your parents are not part of the cliques and things like that, and that everybody's together. So, like, I was extremely athletic, but anytime I got onto a team, I never got played. So, like, it was just hard to fit in. And I also was one of those rare high school creatures where if there was rumors going around, I would go straight to the person. I'm like, this is the rumor about you. Is it true? I just need to know. And they'd be like, no. I'm like, okay. And I'd walk away. A lot of people didn't like that.
I can see that in the high school environment, that potentially causing some conflict and strife.
I stopped the gossip because it's pointless. Like, stop being stupid. I was the intelligence analyst from the beginning. I went in there and figured out what was true or not. And
yeah,
we're like, hey, okay, cool. It's funny, though. One of the girls that picked on me the worst in the beginning, she became my best friend, and we are actually still friends to
really?
this day.
How long did that take, though, from, being the aggressor to actually somebody being on your side of the fence?
It took 2-ish, 3 years, and then we were working in the same place at the children's ski school, and we got shoved together in a shack where we had to, like, write kids' names down and, like, do intake, and we were forced to be friends.
Forced interaction.
We were forced to be friends, and we figured out, wow, we're a lot alike. Like, okay, let's be friends, and we pretty much went and did our thing. She actually was so also, like, upset with the school and the people at the school. She went and became an exchange student her junior year. She took off too. She's like, and I'm out.
Okay, Big Bear school system sounds like back in the day you were going through not the best from a social perspective.
Yeah,
perhaps
no,
the education was amazing.
The teachers did nothing. That's the thing. It's like, I'm getting picked on and beat up, and it was right when they started putting cameras in the schools, but like, they knew where to hide from the cameras if they were going to bully you or whatever. And I would take the teachers, and they didn't really care. And I think it was also at the point I'd already told the teachers basically to pound sand because I was going to go into the military, and they thought I was a lost cause.
Yeah.
You tell some teachers, you tell some counselors you're not going to go to college, and they think you're worthless. And so I wasn't anybody they really cared about at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, their educations and their status in the educational system is probably primary when it comes to how they view themselves. I guess I can understand that to a degree. What I don't understand, though, is people standing by, specifically teachers or people in that position where while others are being, I'm going to use the term abused, which is, I mean, you could, I think, exchange that for bullying pretty easily. That is always graded against me. I'm not, I can't say that I've always stood up and done the right thing, but I'd like to think that my track record is better. I've had more successes than failures, but that's one that I've always had taken issue with. Those who will just sit there and stand by and do nothing.
You have to step in. It's something like, I have children, and I will teach them that when you see wrong being done, you step in and you stop it. And so it's I think it's something that is ingrained in your children if you could teach it to them to be the one that stands up for the small person or the person that's being bullied. It's all you have to do, is you just have to teach your kids how to do it, to do the right thing. And then maybe it'll be better. It's not that my parents didn't teach me that. My parents just taught me to be extremely independent. And when I finally was coming home crying, I'm like, I don't want to go to school anymore. They finally said, we'll sign the paperwork. You could skip your senior year and move on.
Have you ever heard of Fieldcraft Survival?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Mike Glover, who's their CEO, he put up a video. I think, he didn't do it. I'm saying that broadly because in my mind, Mike is the only employee of Fieldcraft because he's the only one I know. So they put up this video, and it was a fake scenario, but they were basically filming people's response, and it was an in public child abduction.
I saw that. I saw it where people
Not
they're
a
walking on their
single
phones. No.
fucking person did a thing about it, and that startles me because I, having kids as well, they're beyond the age of that particular child. So I guess I'm viewing it more from they're the one being filmed for their reaction now, even though they'd probably be a little bit too young for that video, but I'm forecasting ahead. When they were younger, I'd have been like, okay, that's my kid being snatched. Now I'm thinking, how would my kids react? Why do you think it is that nobody in that video did anything?
I think there's a few reasons why. One, well, nobody saw me see that, so it's okay and I can move on.
Yeah.
Right? Just straight out
Yeah.
claim ignorance in their ignorance bubble that they're walking around in. Also maybe fear because it was into a dark alley, right? Are you going to chase a man that just ripped a child in a dark alley? But what's not saying they couldn't have turned around and started screaming for help?
Call 911.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's better than one person grabbing a kid down an alley? 8 of you chasing him down and beating the ever-living piss out of him until somebody's like, well, it's just a joke. I'm like, that's a really shitty joke. And we just beat this dude up. It's your fault.
Yeah, no, I would have gone down that dark alley because it wasn't even just a slight maybe it was a parent walking them in. It was a full grab and snatch over the mouth all the way down that dark alley, and I'm just like,
I think that video is still up on, I believe it's Fieldcraft Survival or Fieldcraft Survival HQ. It's worth stopping what we're listening right now and actually going and watching that video. It's startling to see the lack of response from people.
yeah, no, complete lack of response. But it's just people these days, they don't step in. There's no sense of community. There's no sense of, hey, let's stand up for people. Let's help people out. Is everybody okay? You don't see that, except up here in Montana. Because I've seen some really amazing people in the last few days since I've been here. But for the most part, people don't want to get involved.
It's sad. It's a bad indication, I think, of where we are. I actually think you nailed it. There's less of, if not no sense of community. People are more involved in themselves and worried about themselves than the people that are around them. And that sucks.
Well, no sense of community. And then also when you are well, I'm going to reach out and involve this neighbor in my life, they're not doing it to be neighborly. They usually want something out of it. They're usually oh, my child has a fundraiser, or it's I've lived across the street from you for 2 years and you saw me trying to put my tent on my Jeep last week by myself, yet you did nothing.
For 6 hours.
Yeah, right.
Not that I've ever had that experience of one goddamn bolt that won't go in while the other ones are fitting.
Zip ties. You can never go wrong with zip ties.
It's a very sensitive topic. I don't want to talk about the tent that I tried to get on my car. All right, I didn't get along with that tent. That tent's not on my car right now. It sits, and I say things that are inappropriate to it from time to time as I pass by it because I still have that hurt from being. Well, actually, it probably was my own fault. I think I drilled the holes in the wrong place, but we don't need to talk about that portion of the story. All right. Definitely, I'll practice some Jocko Willink extreme ownership. I am the one who drilled the holes in the wrong spot. However, the tent manufacturer is the one that didn't put the holes in the tent in the right place to match my drill holes. So that's how I'm going to pass that off.
That's very good possibility. I'm telling you with the directions, I was putting it all together. I'm like, it's not going to fit right. It's not going to go on the rack right. It's not going to happen. And then I'm like, we'll just see if it works, and it all lined up properly. So
yeah,
I was okay. But I was missing a bolt, and that's where the zip ties came in.
They will hold you over in a pinch.
Yes.
For sure. Now, I ask you about high school interaction because I think now I graduated in 96. So what would that be? This year would be my 25th high school reunion, which, again, shocking to say. And I look back at who I was in high school and who I am now. Obviously, the same person, same fleshmobile walking around. Definitely different between the years. I think the way I feel about things, I don't think my morality has changed too much. I think my compass had oriented itself to the north, that it was going to be probably refined and shaved off along the way, less of a hammer. But I look back at high school, and the cliquish nature of high school, the popular kids, the jocks, the fill in the blank, and the people who were crushing high school and then failed life after. And it's kind of shocking how many people peaked in high school, whether it be the popular kid or the jock that everybody thought was going to be playing professional fill in the blank, and then they don't. And then, they end up being a hometown baseball coach, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm just talking about the comparison of what people thought they were going to be and where they are now.
If I could tell my kids or high schoolers out there, I want to just tell them that how much your high school life impacts you in the future. It's nothing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nothing.
How much you think you know, how much of a badass you think you are.
Living your full, high school life, going to parties and going to prom and getting those, SAT scores or whatever it may be, that it means absolutely nothing. Yes, if you're going to a certain college or whatever, you have to have your grades. If you want to do brain
surgery, I want you to, skip the partying, but get the SAT.
Exactly. But everything that happened back then, all the drama and all the craziness.
Useless.
It's
waste of energy.
Pointless. It's nothing at all. And I wish I could go back and just be a more confident person. So if that's something that we need to teach our youth, is to be confident in our choices. Right.
Yeah, if I could go back, I would not waste a second talking to the people that were around me. I would go sit down and have a very serious conversation with myself about exactly that. Be more confident. Look, you know what? Who gives a shit about lunchtime in the quad? Let's, focus on yourself. Become the best version of yourself. Keep your eyes on the future. I don't think about it often, but at the same time, I also don't communicate with anybody that I went to high school with. Not that I have a grudge against any of them. Our lives took very different trajectories, and I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, which is... be the best description of Santa Cruz. It's a unique place on the coast of California, in I almost said Half Moon Bay, south of Half Moon Bay in the Monterey Bay, and great place to grow up, even better place to live. And then the best part about it was leaving. So that I think is where the divergence happened. And yeah, I'd spent a lot of time talking to myself, and absolutely none on the other people, which would be part of that conversation with myself. Don't pay attention to any of this shit. Focus on yourself.
And that's the thing in high school. All you think about is, what do the other people think? What friends do I want? Ooh, I want that. I want to date that person. It's all about status and pecking order and trying to shine, or maybe even trying to hide yourself. So if you're super introverted or whatever it may be, you look around in high school and you're 100% hormonally driven, right? And when you're hormonally driven, you're not thinking straight. And I didn't realize this until
your brains aren't even fully formed either.
Exactly.
So you have hormone here, brain development here. It's just not a good matrix.
It's it gives you this weird level of paranoia where you think the whole world revolves around you when it really doesn't.
Yeah. No, I can look back at high school, and if I tried to pick out one thing that happened in high school that had monumental impact or even drastic impact on my life moving forward, I don't think I could pick one out.
For me, it was 9/11 because it happened when I was 15.
That would be something you'd probably remember.
Yeah, and so it was, and I lived in Big Bear. We're under 2 major flight paths too.
Yeah.
So the planes weren't flying. Nobody knew what was going on, and not only what you're saying, how I was bullied, kind of led me to where I am, but also at the same time, 9/11 led me to where I was because I became hey, my brother was already in, and he flew around soft. So it was that's the first thing I thought. I was my brother's going to war. That was the first thing. And so if I look back, which it's the most defining moment of my life because I am where I am right now because of that day.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
It was 9/11. And that's the only thing that happened in high school to me that I look back on, and it was a defining moment. But that had nothing to do with high school. It had everything to do with
it happened while you were in high school.
I was in high
school.
That's
how those aligned.
Yeah.
9/11 for me, I was already in the military. I was already a SEAL. I had already completed 2 pre-9/11 deployments. I don't know if I can say it was the defining moment for me, but it certainly changed the trajectory of my career. It went from hypothetical and conceptual to practical really, really fast. But, who knows? I doubt we'd be sitting here having this conversation absent 9/11. I just don't know where my life would have gone. I don't know. It would have been such a difference in mileage on my body, because I eventually got medically retired, which, like, hey, this is kind of dinged up and this and that and the other, and in the totality, like, get out of here, we're done with you. I'm like, okay. I don't know if that would have happened if 9/11 hadn't occurred. So yeah, I don't know, but it certainly levered it from, hey, this is fun make believe, to hold my beer and we're getting on this plane and going overseas for real.
I mean, there's a possibility I never would have joined the military, because
I think many people are in that boat.
So the patriotism behind it, but also, like, my brother had already deployed multiple times, and in my mind, I'm like, I want to deploy, like, because I had that kind of mindset. So I think, like, I probably would have gone to college. I had a family member who offered to put me through school. They're like, we're going to pay for you to take your SATs, and we'll pay for you to any four-year college in the United States.
That would have been a recipe for disaster and failure for me.
And same here. And so I think they were actually trying to keep me out of the military.
This is our anti-military solution.
And so I straight up blew them off and didn't talk to them for 7 years. So I'm like,
it's aggressive.
I'm going in.
Yeah. So how long did you spend in the Air Force?
A little over 6 years.
Okay. And all of it in the SIGINT pipeline?
Yes. All of it in SIGINT. My deployment to Iraq, it's an interesting deployment. So I get to Ohio, and I'm like, I'll deploy as soon as possible. And what they were doing back in 2006, 2007 is they had a shortage of Army, right? So they needed people with security clearances to fill Army billets, and they called it in lieu of Army tasking. And so they were doing...
In lieu of Army tasking.
Yes.
For anybody listening, when you hear descriptions like that in the military or in government service, I'm going to just say, as a heads up, use those with caution. Things that are phrased like that, in my experience, oftentimes don't have an awesome execution for you as the person engaging in them.
Well, like, I kept volunteering for, like, super SIGINT and cool deployments, and they kept giving those to the guys, even though girls could fill them. They're like, no, this is more of a male deployment. And
how did they determine that?
Oh, just... I don't know, whoever was putting him in there, but I was a small female, so I'm like, I want that one, that one. They're like, oh, we don't know if you'll do all right, because they were embedding a SIGINT mission with, like, they would put these Air Force SIGINTers out in convoys to do SIGINT work. Yeah. And there was a couple people I knew that went. I knew one female that went, and they got pretty banged up and had some rough deployments. But
deployments and whether or not they're rough has nothing to do with your gender. It's and the reason I asked who is or how they made that decision is I worked quite a bit with female SIGINT, and so I'm just curious. I oftentimes find that it is an irrational decision made by somebody in the localized chain of command, not an overall policy. Whether they look at you from like whether they would say, I'm basing this decision for your own protection, or maybe even internally, like they feel like more fatherly or protective. But at the end of the day, combat doesn't give a shit. Deployments don't give a shit if you're a man or a woman. They're equally rough for everybody. I don't know. I found it to be a benefit to have not necessarily SIGINT, but females there, and we ended up working with them to deal with the women and children. The podcast that comes out, this one will be out in a few weeks, but a woman named Kelsey Sarin, she linked up with the Brits, and her specific job was to go into the rooms with the women and children. The amount of things that she found that they were trying to hide, like there's an immense positive that can come from that. And I oftentimes think the decision to say, nope, can't do it because you're a woman, it's just idiotic.
I think it was a localized decision within, like, the people who are tasking out the deployments on the local level within the squadron. I kept trying to go to interrogator school because they were sending Air Force through Army spots as interrogators, and I didn't get one of those, unfortunately, which I would have loved that training. But then I ended up going, in lieu of Army tasking, here you go. Okay, you're going to go over to Iraq, and first, you have to go through Army combat skills training because the Army won't let you fill this billet unless they can take your body and put you in a convoy. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's go play Army. And so I got stuck at Camp Shelby, Mississippi in June, which was a guard base because they were prepping for the surge in Iraq.
Yeah.
Like thousands upon thousands of guard members. And then there was one little group of like Air Force and Navy on the base doing everything that the Army was doing. And so it was a month and a half in like a swamp in Mississippi where we got qualified on everything you need to qualify for to fill an Army position. So that was a lot of fun. I got to do a lot of stuff as a intel weenie that I was I would never have gotten to do otherwise,
That's cool.
Which was fun.
In the Navy, I believe they called it the IA program, the individual augmentee.
Ah, yes,
Again,
that's what it is.
Very broad and odd description. Maybe run away from those. Or go right at them if that's the type of thing that you're into. But it's like, oh yeah, you're just an individual augmentee. Just come with us. Can I get some more information on what that is? No. Just come with us in lieu of Army tasking.
We had some Navy that went through the training. They were Navy lieutenants and they were reservists. And so they were, they weren't active duty and they're coming through his training. One was like a high school principal, one was like a dentist and all this stuff. And they were the coolest guys, right? They were fun, but they were totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that they probably were.
Yeah, so especially like going through combat lifesaver, like you have to stick each other to like learn how to do it.
IVs, yeah.
I got paired up with one of the Navy lieutenants and he was like shaking, terrified of giving me an IV, like a little child. I'm like, just do it already.
I think I haven't seen that many people pass out in my life, but most of the people that I have seen pass out have come near or directly involved with IV training. Whether the person being stuck and they don't realize that they're not the type of person that can watch the needle as it goes in, or the person sticking and then realizing that, yeah, I've never done this before. And I've seen people literally turn green. And it was hilarious. It was actually an officer in one of my platoons. He gives the IV. We're doing our training. We had corpsmen. They'd go to the 18 Delta course, and we would do our own internal medical training. It was super basic and like direct pressure. We weren't even doing tourniquets at that point, and IV stuff, fluid. And I watched the officer gave a guy a stick. I think he got the stick, and we were all looking around, and somebody else noticed. He's like, "Hey, man, you're green." And I looked at him, and it was literally like the green of a G.I. Joe green. And he didn't believe us. He's like, "No, I'm not." He went and looked in the mirror and passed out because he saw how green he was. Seeing he didn't actually like hit the floor, but he was just like, oh, started losing it after he saw how much hit the skin color change in his own body. It was amazing. I thought it was hilarious.
I love it. The funny thing was that we were there for a month and a half, a bunch of us. And I think it was 2 years later when I went on my Afghanistan deployment, the Air Force had implemented people who don't have combat skills need to go through the same type of training.
Yeah.
But the Air Force took what the Army did in a month and a half and simplified it into 2 perfect weeks of everything plus more that the Army did.
I actually think that's way better because I bet you the frequency of training was higher. You probably dove a little bit deeper. Consistently, static line jump school. I think I was in Fort Benning for 3 weeks to do 5 total jumps. They teach static line and free fall as part of the Navy pipeline now. I think it's a total of 2 weeks. You know what I mean? There's compression, and I actually think that there's value from that compression because, like I said, you dive deeper. It's all you're thinking about, and then on to the next subject. It can really be done more effectively.
Yeah, and it was much more effective. I actually did more things in those 2 weeks than I did in a month and a half. And it was basically a refresher at that point. And I liked it. I was like, this is awesome because I'm not having to stand down for 4 hours a day for like the heat in Mississippi, which might have been it was
a safety measure for sure.
A safety measure that and they did it up in Wyoming at a guard base. It was really cool.
I feel like the scenery there would probably be a little better.
Yeah, it was Camp Guernsey.
Nice.
It was really cool. I didn't even know that place existed. And I'm like, this is nice. I like this.
So where'd you land on your first Iraq deployment, and what'd they have you doing?
So I was in Baghdad. I was on Camp Slayer. I worked at...
excellent name for camp, by the way.
Yeah, MNFI, Multinational Forces Iraq, it's like intelligence cell out of the Perfume Palace. And so they had me replacing a private in the Army who had been there for 15 months. He was one of the first Army that got stuck at 15 months. They thought they were going home in a year, and they extended. And so you show up there as 21-year-old kid is like, I hate my life.
I've made bad decisions that have led me to this place. Please help me make better ones. I'm leaving.
Yeah, so I replaced him in the Shia militia cell. So I became an expert as an all-source analyst. I wasn't doing any SIGINT. I was doing all-source work because I was, filling that billet and writing reports on Jaish al-Mahdi and learning all about, the Iranians and
influence
and all that. So for 6 months, I was accumulating reports from all over Iraq, putting them all together, and then they would get pushed into General Petraeus's read book. It was really cool, like somebody that's lower enlisted at a level where all the intelligence comes together and it gets pushed out. And I got to be in rooms I never thought in a million years I'd get to be in. My captain, who led the cell, she had to go to a defeating extremist brief. And she's like, you need to come with me because you wrote the Jaish al-Mahdi part. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. She's like, okay, we're going to go over to Al-Fa. And of course, on our way to Al-Fa, we fed the fish in the water, take the cereal, throw it over. You have to. We go in, and I thought, it was just going to be I don't know if it was going to be a teleconference or whatever it was, but it was every single general in Iraq. Every single general in Baghdad was there. General Odierno, General Petraeus.
Wow.
So much brass. I was the only enlisted that got brought into the room, and I was sitting on one of the back seats.
I was going to say, this is when you find a corner and a curtain and you get behind it.
And so I'm sitting there, and I'm within arm's reach of my captain. And she's
Captain's an 03 in the Air Force, for everybody listening.
She didn't even belong in there. And so I'm sitting there.
Well, in the room you're describing, an 03 would generally be considered a coffee fetcher. Probably an 05 would be a coffee fetcher in that
There
room.
were majors fetching coffee for General Odierno that day.
A major is an 05.
So...
Actually, no, a major would be an 04.
And so I'm sitting there, right, and I'm being very quiet. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to bring attention to the fact that I do not have any kind of brass on me. I don't, because I didn't want to be kicked out. I wanted to listen because then they video conferenced all the other generals from all the other areas of Iraq.
This is a very high level meeting.
And I'm sitting there, and this major turns to me and it's like, you're not supposed to be in here. And I go, sir, I'm here because she told me to be here. I'm like, you can tell her to tell me to leave if that's what you want to do. He fell asleep. He fell asleep.
Yep.
Next to me. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, fine then. But it was a really cool meeting. And then we had a 1-star. His name was General Keller. That was the head of the cell of MNFI. And I got to sit through some really cool meetings with Iraqi intelligence officers and different things. And I learned a lot. Specifically how to pronounce a lot of names, like Ahmadinejad and Khamenei.
It gets out of control fast.
So it wasn't anything that they had taught me at all in any of my training. And it was very much like, throw her into the fire. Best of luck with you. And so did a lot of counter-IED analysis and the directing of intelligence, to push it up the chain. It was really cool. I had a few reports make it up to President Bush at the time. I thought that was really neat. It was a really great bullet. If you're in the Air Force, you get your EPR bullets. And so I'm like, yeah, put that on paper. So
glad to hear the Air Force is exactly like the Navy.
Exactly, in that aspect. Yeah, no, so it was a really cool deployment.
How long were you there?
I was there for 6.5 months. Should have only been there for 6, but we kept, they keep pushing you and pushing you, whatever it was. So, and it was over the winter time. It was October to March, October to April or something like that.
So you wouldn't die by going outside from the temperature?
Nope, not at all. It was great. I was in Afghanistan in July. But
depends on where you are in Afghanistan.
I was in Kandahar.
Yeah, you're going to be pretty hot.
It was a little toasty.
Yeah.
But I really loved my Iraq deployment because it gave me the skill set to do what I'm doing right now with Deliver Fund. It's all source analysis. It's taking that information, putting those different puzzle pieces together, just paying attention to everything that you could suck in and then putting it out so it can be actionable.
Yeah.
Right. So I was very fortunate. I had really good deployments. And
Well, so you came back from Iraq.
yeah.
How much time did you have off between your Iraq deployment and your Afghanistan?
So 2008. So April of 2008, and then I went to Afghanistan in 2010. So I had some time home.
What month in 2010?
I was July of 2010. I went to Kandahar
Okay. I was there from February until August.
till August.
Yeah. Then I rotated out of CAF. So,
You never know. We might have walked by each other.
yeah, maybe with the old Timmy Hortons or the TGI Fridays. It's hard to say.
Oh, the Tim Hortons is such good coffee. I miss it. I liked Tim Hortons.
We're like
coffee.
60 miles probably from the nearest Tim Hortons.
But we're not allowed to cross
that's
the
what I'm saying.
border right
It
now.
might as well be a different continent. I've heard rumors from Canadians, so therefore it means it has to be true that they're talking about opening up the border. Maybe by the time this episode comes out, it'll be open. I've heard July 15th.
I leave July 17th, and I brought my passport. I'm all about going and getting some Tim Hortons.
I actually don't know
before I
where the
leave.
nearest one is, and people are probably like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? It's Canadian coffee.
Yeah, no, but the deployment, so my Afghan deployment was starkly different because I deployed in lieu of Army tasking out of Iraq, but then I had gotten stationed at Fort Meade at the NSA and was working at the NSA doing SIGINT stuff. And
So how does that work? So you're active duty military working for, what is the NSA considered? I mean, it's a government agency, obviously.
Yeah, it's part of the intelligence community, the National Security Agency. It's under like DNI. And
Do
all
they
that.
assign? They just assign a certain amount of desks to military individuals, and active duty military individuals just go and work there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, for how the government works is you have government employees, you have contracted employees, and the military bodies are the cheap labor that you stick in between them all.
I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
You're
So-
going to get paid what you get paid off your Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, and I've always been in joint service environments, but Fort Meade was by far the most robustly joint service environment. So I got to be the NCOIC for the counter IED cell in the Meade Operations Center.
So the commissioned officer in charge of the counter improvised explosive device for where?
At the Meade Operations Center.
Meade Operations Center. All right.
So many acronyms.
Well, that's how you know it's a government organization.
Exactly. So I was in charge of the counter IED cell for Iraq. So when we're fighting in Iraq and working in Iraq, there was SIGINT support back at Fort Meade that would help out the forward SIGINT elements in Iraq. And I was the NCOIC of that. I had every single branch of the military underneath me. I had Coast Guard, I had Navy, I had Marines, I had Army, I had Air Force, and I had civilians and I had civilian contractors. And so I got to work with all these really cool different people, and I got to be part of a really cool mission. And then they're like, your turn to deploy. And they snatched me up out of there. And I was like, but I was doing so well. That's the story of the military. You're doing great. Let's move you.
It is a story. I just had a guy on recently, Wesley Morgan, who wrote the book The Hardest Place about Afghanistan, and talking about the Pech Valley. And one of the biggest struggles was the lack of continuity of information, or why something exists, because you just know the history of your time there and maybe the people before you, but not the people before them. And there's so much lost in that. So many. I was reading the book before sitting down and talking to him. It's like, and then they launched this airborne operation into the exact same helicopter landing zones. And wait for it, the exact same thing happened. And then they would do it again. And then they would do it again.
It's super frustrating, especially in the intelligence community, because you have that turnover in those billets that are turning over every 6 months, or for the soft community, those intelligence analysts are being turned over every 3 months.
Yeah, every 90 days.
Or were. And so
it's a lot.
There's so much turnover, and depending on who the analyst was and what they were doing, they could have made a lot of leeway and gotten a lot of information. And if they don't do a proper handoff, or leadership yanks you out of there with no overlap, which I've seen, and they leave that new person there just
starting from scratch
with emails from the previous person, and you can't make the relationships. Especially in Kandahar, I was doing SIGINT targeting for the Force Protection Unit on base. So Air Force, OSI, they would do like the humant around the base to try to keep the base safe. And I was the SIGINT assigned to them to assist them in that. And the problem is they were under an ISAF mission. I suck at fighting, no. And they
Also accurate.
And they couldn't do, OSI was under OSI was under OEF. Everybody else around us was ISAF. And then there was one other OEF element. And the reason why it's important to decipher if that they were either OEF or ISAF under what mission is they had different rules of engagement. Right. So when it comes to targeting purposes, Operation Enduring Freedom, they were allowed to shoot first.
Yeah.
They didn't have to wait till somebody was being killed with through the ISAF rules of engagement and how they happen. So as a targeter, because what I was doing is I had a target deck. I had bad guys that I had deciphered that they were shooting rockets or providing information and providing money or fuses or whatever it is to shoot rockets at the base. And my mission was to make sure rockets didn't get shot at the base or to ensure that car bombs weren't detonated at the gate. And that's what OSI's mission, Air Force OSI's mission was as well. And they had sources all around the base or whatever.
Who would action the intelligence?
So that's where it got tricky. OSI could go out and action the intelligence.
Really?
They could, but only within like a 7-kilometer distance from the base. Well, that doesn't help me because Kandahar Airfield is so far away from Kandahar City.
Yeah.
And, you get up from that perimeter up to the mountains, and then they can't go any further to action it because that was their mission.
And the idiots who are just going to walk up in daylight or try to cover that open area, they're already dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, they learned that lesson pretty rapidly. Like, maybe we'll just stay away.
Yeah, so, I ended up learning from my predecessor in my position that you could make friends with the J2 in the task force element that was on base. And so I made friends with them, and all I had to do was prove that it tied into their target set.
Yeah.
And so I got myself a new action arm, and it would help, the OSI, my main mission, get their bad guys taken out or killed. And so I would create target packages on bad guys and email them over. And if they didn't answer their email, I would go and start banging on the outside door of their compound and be like, go answer your email. And I'm like, I walked in once, I went in and they weren't paying attention to me, and I had been in civilian clothes because I was hanging out with OSI and we were barbecuing because it's the Air Force, right? So I went in there and I walked through and there was a colonel. I was like, what's a female doing on my floor? I'm like, oh, hey, sir, it's me. And it's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'll just having the guys check an email. And then 2 days later, that target was taken out.
Perfect.
But, you have to have those in-person communications with other analysts who help make the decisions to do that. And if you don't have that, and it's because of turnover, people start, getting froggy. They're not being suppressed, and they start shooting rockets.
I feel like what you do now for Deliver Fund is probably highly relationship-based as well with the organizations that you guys are passing information off to.
Law enforcement, yes, 100%. You have to know how to manage those relationships, or you're not able to. I had
an interesting conversation today with a law enforcement officer that will remain nameless, I'll get to that conversation with you because I'm curious your thoughts on what he said, because he was familiar with Deliver Fund. And he said he had been through the initial training that was ever done, which I don't know exactly when that was, but I feel like it was at least a few years ago. But I'll get to that one because I think
I could name those officers.
You probably could. Well, we can play that game offline. I'm not going to air them out online. But he made an interesting comment, and I'm curious your take on it. But we'll get to that. Okay. So post Afghanistan deployment, you come back. It sounds like we're probably edging towards the end of your military career.
Yeah. So I came back from Afghanistan, and I was 3 months before I went on terminal leave. And I came back, and the thing was, I loved my deployments because I loved missions. I loved, working 18, 20 hours a day. I loved that. And then, falling over after I went to the gym and then repeat.
Yep.
I can live on that cycle, and I love it. And when you come back, CONUS, everything slows down. You're coming off of a constant, caffeine buzz / adrenaline rush that you didn't know that you had. And you're like, I was mean to everybody walking around me. And the thing is, with the Air Force, if you were really good at what you did and you were accelerating, there's a lot of people who think that you should be career and you can continue on. But when you say, no, I'm getting out, it's all of a sudden you turn into the black sheep and they just start treating you like complete and utter garbage.
I think that's not that uncommon. You know, the SEAL community is a great insular community that will tell you, always care more about the person to your left and right, which I totally agree with. And they will get, and it makes it so easy to be incredibly mission focused. And if you express the desire to move on, you know, lift your head up and out and look around a little bit, not always, but often it's like, how could you give up on us? How could you do this? How could you give up on the mission? You're leaving people behind. We can't do this without you. It's like, you can, you will, you'll be just fine. So not uncommon, the experience you went through. I've seen quite a few people go through it as well.
I mean, I didn't even get like a handshake or a thank you, like nothing. And it was mainly because, you know, I'd been gone for 6 months too. And there's some rotation. People didn't know who I was anyway. And, you know, I was trying to work with the junior analysts, the junior enlisted, who were still working that target set. I'm like, this is how this works and this is how that works. I apparently was being mean and they didn't like that. I'm like, seriously? Because I was just being harsh and direct. Because that's how I communicated while I was deployed. As a female, when you deploy, that's your only choice to survive. So I got set aside for like 3 months and I got out. And
did you know what you were going to do after you got out? Did you have your eyes set on a target?
You know, I was going to go to school. I'd had school set up in a completely different career path. I was going to go to Marymount, Manhattan on the Upper East Side in New York and become a television producer. And I had my GI Bill and everything.
How did you land on that? Walk me through the decision matrix on this.
I am a huge movie person and a movie buff.
In general, or do you have a genre that just speaks to you?
Oh, in general. I love movie, TV, films, almost across the board everywhere.
What's your favorite movie?
Legends of the Fall. It's a problem. I can't help myself. But
it's Brad Pitt, isn't it?
1990s Brad Pitt will forever be my crush.
I mean, I'll be honest, he's mine too. I would marry Brad Pitt.
Right.
I would have babies with Brad Pitt if he would let me.
It's the hair. In
it's more than that. Chiseled features, sculpted. It's like a guy's got like a little hammer there. Just like, I mean...
So that's my...
I want somebody to look at me like Brad Pitt looks at the movie camera. You know what I mean? It's just, he's my crush too. We've bonded over this now.
No, so that is my favorite movie of all time. But
of all time?
Of all time, and it always will be. But I get stuck on television series. Like, you know, like I was stuck on Game of Thrones. I still don't want to talk about it.
Okay. Yellowstone?
You know, oh my God, you're going to kill me. I haven't watched Yellowstone yet because I don't have Paramount.
I'm a couple seasons behind as well.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, like Vikings. I watched Vikings.
Okay.
And then I've really gotten into Outlander, so much so I'm reading all the books now. Those kind of things, like Handmaid's Tale.
I've heard of most of these. Damn, okay, you're deep down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, I watch... I'm not saying I watch a lot. I might get like an hour a night in.
Hey, you got kids.
Yeah, exactly.
At 2 a.m. I watch TV from 2 to 2:45 a.m. because my kids are asleep.
It's exactly what it is. But yeah. I don't know. It's my escape from the reality that I have to face every day, which we'll get into that later, what the harsh reality is. So people are always like, have you seen this documentary on human trafficking? I'm like, no, I'm not.
Daily.
I'm like, I'm not watching that because I really need to catch up on Loki on Disney.
So thoughts on it, by the way? I just watched the new one yesterday. It's no big deal.
I'm halfway through the new one right now. I fell asleep last night. I like it. It's different.
I like it too. To be honest, it's turning into a little bit of a mess as the episodes go on.
Yes, it is. I hope they wrap it all up and clean it up. I enjoy like spotting the Easter eggs and stuff in it and looking for the different things.
I haven't seen any of that. I think it's a little weird that he's falling in love with his female self.
That is a little weird.
If they fall in love...
Spoiler alert.
Oh, sorry. So anyway, like hypothetically, if in the show Loki, if you wanted to watch it, and he falls in love with his female self, and they live happily ever after, I mean, those kids are just going to be fucked up. They're going to be super fucked up. They're going to be missing chromosomes.
Like super narcissists with
No,
magic.
just as like it's... I think you're inbred. He's having kids with himself. 2 genetic strains of DNA. I mean, I can't.
Maybe the DNA is different on different timelines.
I was going to say, I'm literally trying to apply science to a fucking sci-fi TV show right now.
No, so that's
Never
the kind
mind.
of stuff I watch.
Disregard.
So I wanted to produce.
It sounds like you were chasing something you're passionate about. I get that.
And I had, while I was deployed in Afghanistan, I had a relationship end badly. And he was part of that plan to go to New York. And I'm like, and I'm going to fall back on being financially responsible. I'm going to go get a contract job.
Yeah.
And,
given your background, I think there were probably quite a few of those out there.
Just a tad. Pretty cool. You don't even need a college degree at that point. And
you had all the operational experience.
I did. Yeah. So I got a contract job, but I took a summer off in Southern California on my terminal leave just to be ridiculous and drunk and stupid, and it was fantastic.
SoCal is not a bad place to do that.
Yeah, Angels games almost every other night. It was a
Sweet.
good time. Went back to the East Coast, and I had so many different job like resumes and interviews out there, and my clearance got a little wonky coming from the NSA, and I basically just pit all the companies against each other to get my clearance through, and whoever got me first got me. And it was a contract out of the NSA for like a year, and I didn't necessarily like exactly what I was doing on that contract, because I'm like, man, I want to make a difference. I'm honestly, I'm quite over the overseas mission. I'm like, I want to make a difference here at home, and I put in for jobs everywhere and anywhere. But I was very drawn to the counter-terrorism work being done by the FBI and all the different positions you could get in the DC area on that, working at the terrorist screening center and all those things. And I got a job at the terrorist screening center, working watch listing.
Did that terrorist screening center exist pre 9/11?
No.
I was going to say, I feel like the positions and organizations exploded post 9/11.
It did. And so the FBI, when, the watch listing and whatnot, they hold the keys. And when...
Is it exactly when you say watch list, I mean, is the description of what it is right there it's literally a list of people that they're watching?
Yeah. It's so, everybody's heard of the no-fly list.
Correct.
Kind of thing. It's the same realm
of
what that is. They built, like, the building that I was in, I mean, it was a museum of 9/11. We had one of the forks from the towers behind the building. We had... You're
not talking about a culinary fork. You're talking about one of the massive branches of steel.
Huge masses of steel.
One of those sits outside of the new development group compound.
Yeah, so we had one of those. We had the antenna from one of the towers in the building, not just off of 9/11, but all terrorist attacks. We had a life preserver from the USS Cole, right? We had the keys from people who didn't survive the Oklahoma City bombings. We had the phone booth from the Atlanta bombing.
Really?
It just randomly sitting there, and you'd walk by it every day.
It's an interesting daily reminder, though, of the importance of the job.
And that's the whole thing. Every time you walked through that building, the work that you were doing, the accuracy, the confirmations, getting the intelligence out to who needed it, you were reminded every single day while you were there. You had no choice but to see 7 different things and touch 10 different things that were right there. It was really cool. It was an amazing job with amazing people, mostly contractors, because it was a 24/7 shop, and senior FBI agents that would oversee us. But I mean, I absolutely love that job, and I was saying all the time, this is the best job that I've ever had. Best job I've ever had. And then I have this job now that I have with Deliver Fund, which is beyond.
Was human trafficking even on your radar at this point yet when you're doing your
Not at all.
So
no,
I figured,
not at all. And, the hard thing was for me was when you're a female in the intelligence community, you get to choose between raising your children or being in a skiff every day. You don't have the choice, to have any kind of flexible work hours. Sorry, there's no telecommuting out of a skiff. You can't do that. So
a skiff, what does skiff stand for? I mean, it's
Secret Compartment Information Facility.
It's a secure room, essentially. Yeah. Think of it as it's secure in many ways, from your ability to get in or out of it, but also signals coming in or out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's
you're basically working in a safe.
Yeah, and it's because like the information that you have access to and the information on how you get that access is in these facilities, which is really funny because like a skiff in the United States is super secure. My skiff in Afghanistan, I had geckos dropping out of the ceiling. So
well, it was probably made out of 2x4s.
It was made out of old Russian plaster.
Sounds about right.
I had my first kid and I came back to work and I was working a midnight shift with a 2-month-old baby, and I would come home every day. I don't remember my son's first 8 or 9 months of his life because
Neither does he.
We're good then. I just didn't remember it. And then in Northern Virginia, childcare is expensive. And I got pregnant, and I'm like, well, I'm going to have to quit because I can't afford a nanny for 2 kids. And so I'm like, well, here we go. I have to give up my career, my 10-year career in intelligence, and become a mom. And it was heartbreaking because I love to work. I'm very career driven. And so I gave up my work. And so there was a couple years there where I didn't work, and I sang a lot of Sesame Street songs and wiped butts, and my brain started to atrophy. It was bad. I'm like, I want to be able to do something. And it's right. I moved from Northern Virginia to New Mexico. I kept my LinkedIn profile up to date, right? I'm like, look, I'm still an intelligence person. I'm just here now. I kept it up to date, and I've started looking for jobs in the area, and there wasn't really anything that was appealing to me from an intelligence standpoint. And I got a random DM on my LinkedIn from Nick McKinley.
Fuckers just slide into your DMs.
Right? Seriously.
Super shady.
And he's like, can I have a phone call? I'm like, who is this joker?
Maybe.
I'm like,
awkward.
I'm like, okay, sure. I think it was more like, I would like to talk to you about a job opportunity. And I'm like, okay, sure. I don't know what I can do about that, but whatever. I have the call with him, and he explains who he is and what Deliver Fund is and human trafficking. He's not explaining human trafficking to me yet. And he brings it up, and I'm like, human trafficking, you mean girls at bus stops? That was my mindset.
I think I was literally having a conversation with my jiu-jitsu coach, Travis, today. As I went up to class, I was like, hey, I'm heading down to do a podcast. He's like, oh, who are you having on? And I said, did you ever listen to the episode with Nick about Deliver Fund? He's like, oh, yeah, human trafficking. He goes, I just never see it, or something along those lines. And I had to say to him, hey, man, I've actually totally reframed how I think about human trafficking, because my first thought was the same thing. It had to be, it was a sex-based thing, women being trafficked. And then after sitting down talking with Nick and him talking about, I'm like, oh, shit. Growing up in the Monterey Bay, huge agricultural component. Nick's like, yeah, there's probably a go-between between the people working in the field and the farmers themselves. And, I wonder if those people in the field are living in a house of 30 people, somebody else is keeping the money. It's like, hey, man, that's actually trafficking in and of itself. It totally changed my perspective of what I think about trafficking. And I realized it's a lot more about leverage.
It is. And so he's sitting there talking to me, and he's like, do you want to hunt human traffickers? And I'm like, hell yes. He's like, you can do it from home. And I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Tell me more.
And at that point, I didn't need an income. And so, I'm like, okay, sure, why not? And then I remember, it was a month later, and I got to sit through a law enforcement class that Deliver Fund was teaching, so I could learn how to do what I do. And at that point in time, we didn't have a really strong structure to our analysis program or anything. So I was learning like the cops would learn from us. But the thing was, the cops come in there and they know what human trafficking is for the most part, specifically because these guys are detectives that have had previous training. But my mind was completely blown because I saw what human trafficking actually was. And although it is very much a hidden crime, once you know what human trafficking looks like and how it works, you see it happening everywhere.
I was going to say, it's hidden from the perspective of the mechanics of what's going on. The execution of it seems like it's right in front of your face. You don't see the transfer of money, but you're seeing the end result of the trafficking. Not everywhere, but I think once you realize what you're looking for, or maybe you live in an area where maybe the agricultural one would be a good example, not necessarily Santa Cruz or the Monterey Bay, but you may be driving by it every single day and have no idea that it's happening, and it's literally hidden right in front of your face.
Well, I mean, you might be in a hotel on travel and you see what you might think is a willing prostitute walking around like with the old man at the bar kind of thing. But then what you don't notice is her pimp in the corner watching every single move, right? Or like I was out on Catalina Island for the 4th of July. And
not a shitty place to spend 4th of July, FYI.
Not at all. It was a lot of fun. And so,
tough to get a DUI there. Mostly because you can't drive.
But I did see LA County sheriffs pulling over golf carts like nobody's business.
That's just rude. That's just rude. And I feel like they would give you a DUI for that.
They totally would.
Side note, my dad almost got one on a bicycle. He can tell that story the next time he's here.
Was he sitting on the bicycle or was it in motion?
At point in time, it was in motion. Then he was getting spine boarded to the hospital. Again, he can tell the details of that story.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there and I'm eating at like an outside restaurant right on the water. And I was with a friend who is very, very close to Deliver Fund, and she's a donor and a really good friend of Deliver Fund. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking and I watch a man walk by with 6 girls behind them, and I'm spotting out branding tattoos, and I'm like, oh, he took his stable on a vacation. A stable is what a trafficker calls his group of girls. And I sat there and I even took a picture of it. I'll show you later. I'm like, and there's the trafficker, there's his girls, there's his bottom girl, and I just saw them walk by. But to anybody else, it was just a group of girls with one boyfriend on vacation. Looked like this guy was walking with a harem, and that is not what it was at all.
Are there mannerisms, or in that particular circumstance alone, obviously, were there mannerisms normal? And I asked that because, again, what was shocking to me is, you don't see the mechanics of the money or the leverage that's being applied. It's people who could appear to be living their normal life, and I'm curious how they looked from an outside perspective. Did they look trapped? Did they look like they were under the influence of leverage?
Not at all.
And I think that's how it can hide in plain sight.
Yeah, well, so like a lot of these victims are so manipulated, and if he was bringing them out to Catalina, he might have actually had been selling them there. I'm not sure. He might have had clients. He might have come out on a bigger boat or something. These girls look like they're acting willingly, but they are performing sex acts and they are not keeping their money. All the money has to go back to the trafficker. And then he rewards them by taking them to Catalina, by buying them a purse, by not beating them that night, by making sure they get their dose of heroin at the right time during the day. And so if a normal person wouldn't have seen anything wrong, but like I said, I see certain things. And I'm like, okay, really, I can't escape this. And I see it in airports. And if you're ever in any like red light districts or any places where like prostitution is taking place, you're going to see it too, because the traffickers sell their victims alongside willing prostitutes that are independent, that are not being...
That may potentially be there by choice or whatever life circumstance
100%,
that they're probably in control of.
They're in control of their funds, right?
Yeah.
But then the traffickers, if they find out that those girls are independent, they will prey on them until they get them underneath their control. They'll straight out corner them and beat the living daylights out of them and make them choose. They make them choose to take them on as their manager and things like that. So it's just like a deep, dark world, and you see it everywhere. And it's not anything I thought I would have ever understood right when Nick hired me. I'm like, wait, what is this? I don't understand it. And like, I feel like that the Air Force and the NSA and the FBI, they really set me up with the skill set to be a stellar analyst. But then there is the aspect of learning your target set, right? So I was so counter-terrorism, like mind frame centric, and understanding the cultures, like the Islamic cultures, and then the different sects of Islam in whatever country I was in at the time and whatnot. And so I had to basically wash everything out of my brain of what a counterterrorism like target set was and understanding, and learn a completely new target set. And it took me to get caught up to be able to understand it and see it, man, it took me at least 4 months just to scratch the surface to understand what I was looking at, because it was so big and so complex.
Kick that mic in front of your face. Pull that thing over there. There you go. Perfect.
There you go.
Where did you start on that journey of learning about it?
A lot of reading. Nick has a list of books that you should read. And so reading those books and then going directly to survivors and asking them what their experiences were, reading their books and reading their memoirs of what they'd gone through. And no matter what survivor it is, they all have the same exact story. It's textbook on how it happens, the manipulation, the control, the grooming, the exploitation. It is textbook. And it's so textbook that traffickers actually write books on how to do it. And so I read those too. There's manuals. You can buy them online. You could actually find them open source on how to traffic women. It's called Being a Pimp. It's how to be a pimp.
There's a book called Being a Pimp?
The 48 Laws to Pimpin'.
Okay.
And it's a full manipulation handbook on how to do it. And so that, and then infiltrating their social media and being part of them and creating accounts and infiltrating their media and learning who they were and how they worked and where they were and how they talked. And I pull my phone up right now and message a trafficker and go back and forth with him right now.
So, without giving away the details of trade secrets, we'll leave it at that. How were you able to start doing that? How are you able to start navigating through these systems and interacting with these people directly?
Well, I said I liked movies, right?
Correct.
So I do like acting too. You just have to, I had to.
I mean, is it literally though, is this stuff so close to the surface that it takes just a peripheral search to find how they're communicating, where they're communicating?
It's all front-facing open source. They openly communicate, they openly recruit, they openly sell. This isn't dark web stuff. This is front-facing social media, front-facing websites where they sell their victims, front-facing communication platforms where they go back and forth and they lure their victims in, right? And so it was all right there, and I know where all of it was because I had been working with law enforcement. I had been on operations with law enforcement with Deliver Fund, supporting them from a strictly behind the computer level. But you learn from the officers, you learn from the survivors, and you see how things are happening and how, the different cases are taking form. And then when you're digitally exploiting those victims and finding who their traffickers are and exploiting them as well, I just soak it all in and I understand it. In a million years, I have never been any kind of situation like a trafficking victim would be in. Mm-hmm. And I've never been a trafficker either, but I know enough to where I can play the game to get the information, the intelligence I need to lead law enforcement to where they are with the intelligence that they can use to prosecute them.
How is it talking to the victims?
I don't work directly with brand new survivors. So if a victim is brought in by law enforcement, there are victim services personnel that work directly with law enforcement that would be there to work with those victims and speak with them and get them help. But with survivors.
Mm-hmm. That's what I meant. More survivors. Not right off the, I'm going to use the term front lines because I don't know what else the term would be.
Yeah, that is. It's front line.
Yeah, a survivor. I mean, as you said that there was the story of the recruitment and all those steps, I would imagine that the stories of the people living through that would probably be very similar as well too.
And one thing that I've seen through with all survivors that I have been in contact with is they did not believe that they were trafficking victims, even when they had been rescued or had been made contact with law enforcement, and they didn't believe that they were the victim. They thought it was their fault. Because the traffickers make it seem like it's
I was going
their
to say
fault.
that's got to
'Cause
be
the
a
traffickers make
metric of the conditioning.
they make it seem like it's their decision that they were there in the first place, or they got themselves into that situation. And so with all of them, they very much, and it breaks my heart because some of them, like the true healing process, what I've seen with survivors is when they are getting past their traumas and they're thriving, is when they can, openly admit, like, it was not me. This is what had happened to me because of this person. And it's really hard for them to do that. It takes years. I mean, I know some of the most amazing survivors that we work with, like Tamaya Nagy and Sandy Storm. They both work for Deliver Fund. It took them years and years and years to even realize they'd been trafficked. Like, they had no clue that they'd been trafficked. And it was years past that after getting out of it. And then they're like, oh, wait a second. Like, they hear something on the news or they heard something and they look into it further and they're like, I wasn't just a sex worker with a pimp. I was a trafficking victim. Most definitely. And it's, talking to them, like, they're the strongest people I've ever met in my life. Like,
yeah, no doubt.
I mean, they've survived rape. They've survived, like, being imprisoned and kidnapped and drug abuse and mental manipulation and fear and threats and so much more. And when they're able to come through that, and then when they decide that they want to use their story to fight what's happening now, I mean, that's so strong. It's so hard to turn around and face your past traumas every single day to try to free people. And without them, Deliver Fund wouldn't be who they are, because
I was going to say, but their insight is just invaluable.
It's priceless. Like, a really great story. Sandy, I love her to death. The first time I met her, she was hanging around Deliver Fund's headquarters in Dallas. And I'm like, maybe I should just ask her. I had this case, and the pictures of the victims in the illicit online ads that were selling these victims, the girls had bite marks on their backs. And I'm like, why would they be doing that? And she knew the exact answer. And it's because the trafficker was trying to punish the girls even more, kind of thing. So, like, you can see these victims and spot these victims in these ads, and then you have to filter them through all of the ads because there are actual sex workers and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of telltale signs and different methodology that we use to confirm that it's trafficking. But, like, some of the pictures that you're seeing, like the question of why it happened, you can only get that from another trafficking victim.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so she provides that insight. And now, I like to say it, you take your SIGINT and you take your human, and if you pair it together, it's unstoppable, right? So
Sometimes.
But that's what that is so we have the digital side with Deliver Fund, those digital footprints of that trafficker and all that information. And then when you have law enforcement on the ground getting that further intel and confirming it, they're your human. And then you take the SIGINT, and then they develop out that case, and then there's no stopping it in court. And the whole goal is to ensure that trafficker is put away, because the ultimate form of prevention of human trafficking is to remove the trafficker from the situation. You have your trafficker, you have your buyer, and you have your victim. And the manipulation standpoint of it is the money that the trafficker is taking from the victim in the victim sex act. Take the trafficker out of it, it just becomes an exchange from a willing sex worker and a purchaser.
Yeah.
So you've got to remove that aspect of it. You can't arrest your way out of the problem through the demand. I can speak to the fact that I've posted for research purposes and other things like illicit online ads or assisted law enforcement for lure ops and different things. You will have 600,000 replies in one night to one ad.
I do believe they call it the oldest profession.
It is.
Which, if people are willingly choosing to go down that path, make whatever choice you want to with your life. I'm not saying I agree with it, but there's a difference, and the difference is choice.
And, so Yes, if a woman wants to go out there and do things with, personally, I have my own opinions, but on her aspect, if that's what she wants to do and she is keeping all of the money.
If she's in control of that decision,
Yes.
that's a different conversation.
If she is not under force, fraud, or coercion, then have at it. But if there is somebody there that is manipulating her, making her do that and give the money up, or even a boyfriend going, in order for us to live, you have to go make this money this way. Things like that.
First off, get a different boyfriend.
Exactly right. It's trafficking. And if you're under the age of 18, you don't have a choice. There's no such thing as a child prostitute. So it's automatically trafficking. And this isn't just an opinion. This is legal definition on that aspect, right?
Have you seen the attempt to redefine as a minor attracted person?
I have seen that, and it's just plain out disgusting.
It's fucking horrendous.
If somebody wants to bring that to my face and say it to my face, then I'll just hope that you're not within arm's grasp. Like,
I have legitimately seen people, not face to face, on the internet, right? Which is, of course, where all true battles exist. They're being serious. Like, no, it's a medical condition. I'm a minor attracted person. Like, no, you're a pedophile.
You're mentally ill.
Yeah, we're not going to talk our way about.
You should be locked up.
Yeah, you're not going to talk your way around an attraction to a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old. Well, what if I have the consent of that individual?
No.
Yeah, you don't at that age. Very, very interesting. I've only seen that recently, and it's disturbing to me.
It is there's many people out there trying to do this that are obviously mentally ill and they need a lot of help. And, honestly, I don't think their brains cannot be rewired and trained, and they should not be anywhere around children ever, and nor should they be trying to use wokeism to change people's mind on that.
Yeah, to redefine something on paper.
Absolutely not. No, it won't ever happen. Not at all. You're going to see people on social media who have malleable minds who are like, well, maybe we should care. And if you're one of those people, which I doubt any of those people listen to this podcast.
I hope not.
Or if you know any of them, they just right upside the head, smack them. Like, no, that's not acceptable. They're children. They're innocent children. And pedophiles and men who prefer younger prostitutes and different things, they're disgusting.
Do you guys encounter a good amount of underage trafficking?
Huge. So, gosh, the buzzwords in the last year has been child sex trafficking. Everywhere you hear it, right? And so a lot of people in your mind, when you think of child sex trafficking, your mind automatically goes to very small, right? You think small children, young children.
Actually, yeah.
Right?
I guess
it goes
that would
that
be.
way. Well, a
like
child,
almost infant for whatever
reason.
I can't think of why.
The problem, when you hear child sex trafficking, you think of little kids that are being sold in dark rooms.
Yeah.
And although there are children at that age that are sold, it's usually familial trafficking. I haven't met a detective who hasn't worked a case when the child is under the age of 10 that wasn't being sold and abused by somebody that they knew.
It would be hard to do so unless it's like a daycare environment or something like that. Just get access to the child.
Yeah, and so that does happen, right? And law enforcement chase those cases down as hard as they can. But the majority of child sex trafficking in the United States is happening to 12 to 17-year-old girls in the guise of prostitution on the front-facing illicit ad websites. And so the traffickers will sell them because they're, in this day and age, you're 12, you can almost be fully formed, some girls, right? And they are selling them as willing prostitutes. And so
Where are they finding 12-year-old girls?
They're being lured away as runaways.
Oh, fuck, that's right. Nick told that story about the kid who was lured. It was through one of the, video game consoles.
Video game consoles, yeah. Or it's they're finding them within the child foster systems, running away. Children that are within the system are a much higher likely to be trafficked because they don't have that influence of stable parents.
Or oversight or attention.
Exactly. And so these older children get lured away and they start getting sold. And think about it. When you were 14 years old, you don't have food, you don't have housing, and then all of a sudden you have somebody who cares and loves for you.
Do they, though?
They think they do.
Yeah.
That's what they think, and that's
I'm not
what they
going to call
feel.
somebody who's willing to traffic a child. I don't give a fuck what they do for that child. Caring or loving? Yeah. Nope.
Yeah, no. So they're being sold, and the worst part is the purchasers, the Johns that are purchasing these girls off these illicit online ad websites. You cannot tell the difference. And I guarantee you, most of the Johns don't care. They're just looking for somebody to buy to fulfill that need at that time for themselves.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference between the 14-year-old girl and the 22-year-old girl. They don't know the difference between the trafficking victim and the willing prostitute. You don't know the difference. And the trafficking victims are not going to run away screaming. You want to know why they're not going to run away screaming when you go in there? Because the very first time they met with a John, the John asked, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" And that John, she probably outcried and goes, "Yeah, I need help. I don't want to do this." And
I feel like that individual was planted there.
It was planted there by her trafficker, and then they beat the living crap out of them.
Yeah.
And go, or they go, "That was a cop and he paid for you, so don't you even try to go with any cops either, because they're just going to beat you, or they're on my payroll, or they're going to put you in jail and they're going to rape you too." And so they condition them in a certain way to where if they think they outcry, they're going to be beaten. They're going to be hurt, to an inch of death. And so they're like, the better you act for me to make your money and make your quota, the better your life is going to be. And so you have these 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds that are putting on a show for a John to make as much money as possible, and the Johns will never know the difference. And nor do the Johns care. I've seen interactions between law enforcement and Johns, and they're like, I'm just getting my service.
Yeah, they're there for them.
They think it's a victimless crime. And the problem is it's not, because there is a lot of trafficking that's happening out there, and you don't know if it's a child or not. There's a case that I worked in Texas, and I got a call from a law enforcement officer we work with, and she's 14. This is the second time she's run back. Can you find her? Took me a while, but I found her. I located her. They went in and they rescued her again. They put her back with her grandmother, and she ran away back to her trafficker again. And she kept running, and I watched her from this young, beautiful, innocent girl keep going back to having a huge branding tattoo across her neck and then across her chest. And then I watched her get pregnant.
You're talking about like a possession type tattoo? Like this person is mine?
Yes, branding tattoos.
What do they look like? I mean, what are we talking about
So
here?
they can be anything. A lot of traffickers like to personalize them. There was actually a trafficker who was really into Superman, and he put Superman tattoos on all his girls, and he had one as well. Some of the more common ones people think of and know of are crown tattoos or king, queen tattoos, but it can really be anything. It's their own individual,
flavor, if you will.
Brand. I mean, traffickers will even tattoo their own names on their victims, on their hairlines or above their eyebrow.
What?
Yeah. And so to show that that person belongs to them. You'll see girls that are trafficked and they have 50, 60 cover-ups. That's because they've been sold between tons of different traffickers. And they're like, you can't have his brand. Go get that covered up and go get a new one. And so I watched this innocent girl just continue to get worse and worse and worse on her social media. She was posting it on her social media, and it's a hard place for law enforcement because you can't imprison a minor trafficking victim to save her from herself. You can't do it. You have to put her with a guardian. And then for the most part, the reason why they're in that spot in the first place is because of the guardian. So, it's hard, especially with minors, especially with the teenage girls. They run back constantly. They don't want law enforcement's help. They'll fight them to a T. Law enforcement doesn't feel like they're rescuing these victims. They're making contact with them. It really takes the victim themselves to be able to outcry and come out. there's a statistic somewhere out there that says it takes 5 law enforcement contacts for a human trafficking victim to outcry to ask for help. 5 contacts. And that's an average. So, it's hard. And so these victims, when they do outcry, they're the ones who have truly rescued themselves. Right.
What's the life of a human trafficking victim look like when they're no longer of service to their pimp or fill in the blank? I mean, I don't want to use the term shelf life, but when the individual no longer becomes of service to that trafficker, do they just disregarded, swept to the side?
So there's a couple of different options. Some of the victims, we'll call it, they age out, and they become traffickers themselves because it's all they know. So there are female traffickers out there, and they'll end up running other girls and selling other girls themselves. And then there's also the girls that are so run down and just done for. They're addicted to drugs. They're in a complete cognitive decline. There's some that are just sick of it and they somehow get away and then they go live the rest of their lives. If a young girl is too much of a problem to a trafficker, there's a really simple solution, and it's a hot shot, which is an overdose of heroin. So you got to think of it this way. We have in 2020 over 348,000-ish missing children reports filed by the FBI. Right. 91% of those were considered endangered runaways. According to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, they took a smaller sampling of that number, and it was 1 in 6 that were likely being trafficked. So if you apply that sampling of 1 in 6 to 350,000 or whatever, that's like 50,000 possible minors that had been involved with trafficking. And the real problem is, too, especially if they're between the ages of 14 and 17, they're not considered, exigent circumstances because they leave on their own as runaways. So law enforcement doesn't even have the jurisdiction to go chase after them to see what has happened. Yeah. And so, you've got thousands of potential trafficking victims out there. How many of those girls end up as a drug overdose and are not investigated as a trafficking victim? Right.
Probably impossible to tally.
And, so it's like we don't even know the totality of how bad it is out there because, the jurisdictions don't report things the same and jurisdictions don't talk to each other. And, a lot of them are being looked at as runaways or drug overdoses. And it's like, when's the last time, if you have homeless where you live, when's the last time you saw a young homeless girl holding up a sign for change?
I don't know if I've ever seen that.
That's because they get scooped up within the first 48 hours of being on the street by a human trafficker. They're approached. Yeah. Right. And so, the problem is a lot worse, and we aren't trying to sensationalize numbers. The numbers we do have, we try to use them and speak on them. But even then, the statistics are just so hard because we don't have it going across all levels. We have some really great federal statistics out there, but it's the local jurisdictions and it's the local law enforcement that are dealing with this every single day. And then it's just it's hard. It's really hard.
Do you guys ever get pushback from law enforcement agencies? Along the lines of hey, we got this. We're the sworn
absolutely.
Representatives.
Well, that's the thing is we, as Deliver Fund, we do not work with anybody but law enforcement. And we equip, train, and advise them. And, the way we really get them to drink the Deliver Fund Kool-Aid is to come through our course. Mm-hmm. And hey, and now we can assist you. We can make target packages for you. We can assist you on operations if you would like it. It's very rare that we just cold outreach. Here's a target package for your jurisdiction. I don't know who you are, because that never really goes over well.
Can they action a target package without verifying the information themselves?
Law enforcement. So like we're providing those leads for them
Yep.
with the actionable intelligence, and by the nature of actioning that intelligence, they're verifying along the way.
So the conversation I had today, and I have to paraphrase because I obviously don't remember every single word. So I'll reserve the right to maybe use the incorrect word from time to time. But essentially what he said to me was, there's a difference between information and intelligence, and that Deliver Fund is, it's a nonprofit organization, and I appreciate what they're doing. However, we still, you know what I mean? It was almost like it was too much, like everything that they're doing is open source. He used the term open source, which I was thinking, well, you already talked about it. These people are doing these things front facing open source anyway. And let's not pretend like, well, maybe in the Flathead Valley, they have access to some very high level, government agency databases. Maybe they do. I don't know how many people they have dedicated to using those things. And I don't want to say that he was necessarily dismissive, but it was interesting. It was almost like, hey, we got it. And maybe Manning has something to do with that. Maybe a caseload that is unbearable has something to do with that. I was a little bit surprised.
Some law enforcement officers are more apprehensive than others. Well,
that's why I asked if they can action a target package that you present to them without doing their own investigation. Because I thought, okay, maybe they have to go back and reconfirm everything. And let's say and I'm making this number up, let's say they have 100 cases they need to get done before they get to that. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's adding to their caseload.
And
I don't know.
That's the thing is when we work with law enforcement, we don't just randomly push them information, because if we did, we would drown them. What we do is like shooting fish in a barrel, and I could right now sit here all day long and just pump out target packages. And it's not just like, look here, I think this is a lead. Like we give them information on, this is a trafficking victim. We've attached it to her trafficker. This is her trafficker's name. This is how many times this trafficker's done this and this and this and this and this and this. And it's like everything that they need. But we work directly with law enforcement at their request. So they come to us and go, can you assist us in this operation? Mm-hmm. Or, hey, like I could feel my watch blowing up right now. I'm sure it's cops going, hey, Cara, I need your help with this. And we assist them where they don't have certain tools. And yes, it's all open source information, but we actually have access to databases, and we've created a database that the civilian population does not have access to.
Nick showed me a little bit behind the curtain. Yeah. All I'll say is, damn.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, when you've got...
The ability to connect the dots was amazing.
Well, when you've got former CIA, former SEALs, and former NSA, and
Let's
we get to
the SEALs out of that. Right? They're hot trash. They're good for hair gel and photo shoots.
That is true.
Yeah.
Sometimes they smell nice in the right environment. Anyway.
It's the cocoa butter that they're generally wearing.
It's the cocoa butter.
Yeah.
Does that come with the book deal?
Most of the guys will get that with the royalties from the book deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have this discretionary income, so it's usually like a soft cover Porsche and just like a selection of coconut oils. And from my experience.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
If you're into that type of thing.
Well, when you've got all these people who have used intelligence overseas, and we've seen every single tool that's used out there on a classified level, like we can do this on an unclassified open source level, and we want to make it like this. When you have an analyst that's driving the development of a tool in conjunction with human trafficking survivors and law enforcement officers, including retired law enforcement officers and current law enforcement officers, you're going to make an unstoppable tool. Right. So we have these tools. Then we also have database accesses that the civilian population does not have, which is one of the reasons why we can only work with law enforcement, because of the data that's in there. Yep. And so it's not just a random, I think that's trafficking. It's a full dossier, and, A, B, C, 5 meters, go.
No, I saw one. It was impressive for sure.
Yeah. And so, we do It's law enforcement. It's the same with the military. Like, you have to become their friend. And sometimes not everybody wants to be your friend.
Or sometimes, military organizations, they will set a policy for the organization, and you have individuals that are more hesitant to execute the policy as directed. I mean, and that's why I was just curious. And it was such a random conversation that popped up literally today. I'm like, of all the days, I'm like, okay. And it, a couple things, like I said, stuck out, and there's probably some variables that I'm not aware of, but I was like, all right, I'm definitely going to be asking you this question today.
Yeah, that's also something, though, something I learned in the military and providing intelligence specifically in Afghanistan to like those task forces, and like there's Rangers running around and I was giving them targets. I had to learn very quickly that as an intelligence analyst, no matter where you work, you have to understand that the intelligence you are providing is putting people's lives in danger. Like, if you're going to send them out on this target, there's a possibility that they're not going to come back. So your target better be 100% accurate. Mm-hmm. And so, I learned very quickly to do that. And then the second half of that is letting go once you've done everything that you can, because you have no control over it anymore.
I feel like it would eat you alive if you weren't able to let go to a degree.
And it almost did the first time that Americans died, when intelligence that I provided sent them out. And although it had nothing to do with what I provided, it was actually like bad information, reconnaissance information. And they didn't have a view of the ground because there were trees and there was a daisy chain IED in a ditch, and 2 guys went in and they didn't come out. Yeah. And I was really upset about that because they were going after my target, and it really really upset me. And I had to learn, like, you didn't do anything. Like, you had to learn to separate that out. It happened more than once over there when that happened. And
it's kind of the rules of the game if you're going to enter into that particular game.
And so truly good intelligence analysts will put everything they can into something, do everything they can do to bring it to the attention of the action arm. And once the action arm holds on to it, you walk away and let go, and whatever happens, happens. And then you move on to the next target. And so that's something that I've taken with me to Deliver Fund. Is like, so I've developed out the intelligence the very best that I could. I have all the information that I have. I'm handing it over to law enforcement. Whatever happens, happens. And that's hard because we pump out a lot of intelligence. Yeah. Law enforcement is extremely undermanned, under-resourced, and not all of our targets get actioned on. And so
not even all 911 calls get answered.
Exactly. And so you have to go, okay, well, that victim is still out there. She's still being raped 10 times a day. And you have to go, all right, I'll move on to my next target now. But the cool thing with Deliver Fund is that tool that you saw. It's called PATH, the Platform for Analysis of Targeting Human Traffickers.
She said that, Nick, not me. Just so you know, I'm still inside the boundaries of my NDA. That was not Andy Stump that said that.
We're allowed to talk about PATH. And so PATH, every piece of data and information we put in there, it stays in there. And it can be brought back up. And so say if I created a package in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and in like a year later, like, it wasn't actioned because it's New Mexico. And although I love my New Mexico law enforcement, you don't nearly get to do as much work as you should because of political restraints. Then if she moves to Tennessee, or if she gets moved to Dallas, Texas, or out to Florida, and we're working an operation in Florida or working an operation in Texas, and the information gets entered, it glows orange to say it already exists. So the intelligence is there.
That's the beauty of the technology age we live in.
And it's saving hundreds of man hours and making connections between jurisdictions and breaking down those silos like no other way done before. And I mean, we've seen it work real time, and it's absolutely amazing to see that something I entered 2 years ago, and then the girl gets saved in Florida at the Super Bowl, and it's like, yay, like it worked. And we're seeing that almost every day now because we've been building these databases up. So I feel like when I was overseas putting those targets together and pushing out information, if they weren't actioned on, then it was over. But we've changed that aspect with Deliver Fund. It's never over because we've saved that intelligence. It's in our database. It will be there. It's the largest, cleanest human trafficking database that exists. Yeah. And, storing that data and hoarding that data. I'm a data hoarder. I'm like, oh, where'd you get that information? I'm like, oh, what's that? Let's put that in there. And we vet it too. So any piece of information that goes in there is confirmed to be associated with human trafficking in the United States. And so we can pull that up. We can put it together. We can push it on. We can put the detectives together that would be working within the jurisdictions, make sure that communication works. A couple months ago when that happened, we had a team working an operation in Florida, and a girl shows up, a minor, with her trafficker who had just 2 weeks before been caught up in Dallas. And within 30 minutes, the detective in Dallas had been called. And then it turns into the detectives like, we're going to charge her here in Dallas, or charge the trafficker. Sorry, the victim, of course, is not going to be charged. The trafficker is going to be charged in Dallas. The trafficker is going to be charged in Florida. And then because there's an interstate nexus,
Federal.
he's also going to be charged federal. He's never going to see the light of day. It's never going to happen, especially in Texas, because she was a minor. That's life. She's gone.
I mean, personally, I would rather light those people on fire like Roman candles on the 4th of July than actual fireworks. But Nick said that's not a good idea.
It's not allowed, unfortunately. Deliver Fund works within the confines of all laws.
Yeah, it was like, hey, basically, as a suggestion, take it easy. What we don't need is
We can't.
super special operation. What did my buddy call him the other day? Very special operators. He was a team guy for like 20 plus years too. We're making fun of ourselves. He's like, yeah, we don't need any very special operators running around with their goddamn ARs and, COTS, night vision goggles, and like body armor. Like, just take it easy.
Well, no, it's so counterproductive. Yeah. Okay, yes, Nick knows how to kick down doors, obviously. Jeremy Mayhew, our vice president, knows how to kick down doors. Michael Fullerlove, also a SEAL with he needs hair gel. His hair's always messed up.
Christmas is right around the corner.
Right. I think I'll get him something.
I would. Stocking stuffer.
They all know how to kick down doors. Nick taught me how to kick down doors. He gave me CQB training. It was really fun. He's taught me a lot of really cool stuff to understand, and
here's the thing,
mainly
though.
to keep myself safe.
Don't kick the door. Okay.
No, but
put an explosive charge on the door. Slightly overload, depending on who's on the other side. Clack it off, and then walk in there like you own the bitch, because they're all going to be unconscious or have their bell rung.
And put the sunglasses up as I do it.
Yeah, I mean, they can be down on the bridge a little bit, and then just slide them up the top.
Okay. All right, I'll work on that. But the thing is, we don't kick down doors. That's not our job anymore. Yeah. We have these amazing skills from the intelligence community and how we put intelligence together, and law enforcement needs that assistance. I mean, we're productive. We've taken our lives as veterans, and we're now moving forward and being productive with that and doing everything we can to contribute to society with our skills. And being cool and running around in kit and kicking down doors is really neat and all, but in the fight against human trafficking, there's just no place for us there. There isn't. Law enforcement are the only ones who can legally put a trafficker behind bars. If you were running around saving victims all day, all you're doing is creating shelf space for the trafficker to go get a new victim. Therefore, you think you're saving lives and you feel all good inside and warm and fuzzy. Congratulations, you just ruined another life in the process if that trafficker was not put away.
Yeah. Yeah, without removing them off the chessboard, it doesn't seem like it would have an incredible impact. How old are your kids?
I'm gonna keep my kids' ages and stuff off the spectrum.
Well,
yeah.
I was asking because I have all teenagers.
They're younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much do they know about what you do? That's why I was asking.
How much do my kids know about what I do? They know.
Because some of these conversations I'm going to call are age appropriate.
Well, you know what? I actually had a conversation with them on the way to school a couple months ago, and my kids know that I work with law enforcement to find bad guys.
Okay.
But they hear me talking on the phone, or they hear something and I say human trafficking, and I was driving to school.
Well, it's not like kids would ever just pick up stuff you would not want them to repeat.
Right.
Or know about. Yeah.
Right.
Fucking sponges.
Exactly. And it was like, hey, mommy, what's human trafficking? And I'm like, oh.
Have a great day at school.
And I'm like, I talked about this all day long. I talk about force, fraud, coercion, and blah, blah, blah all day long. I know how to talk about human trafficking, but how do you talk about human trafficking to small children? Well, guess what? Congratulations. You could talk to even down to a kindergarten level about human trafficking. You could talk to them about labor trafficking and break it down really simple when somebody makes somebody do work and they do not get paid for it, or they do not get reimbursed for it properly. And I'm like, it would be like me saying, you need to go vacuum, clean up the dog poop, and make your bed. And obviously when you have kids and it's their chores, that's what they're supposed to do. But It would be me going, I'll give you $100 once you've completed all of that. And then when they complete it all, I'll take your $100, you get nothing. Now go do it again. Making them do work under force, fraud, or coercion, and then taking the money from them. And then I went deeper, and I'm like, so in the United States, we're very lucky because we live in an amazing country where children cannot do what we call child labor. And there's child labor laws that were brought up. And I always go way bigger with my kids than I should because I'm hoping they're sponging like history lessons.
They are. They may not remember the details, but I think they'll probably get.
When I was like, so
the
there
intent.
was the Industrial Revolution where we had all these factories and they were having children work in them and they were really bad and they were hot and sweaty and children were getting hurt and they weren't going to school and they weren't making any money. And so we made these laws to where we don't have children working in factories. And I'm like, instead of going to school right now, you would be in a factory every single day. And unfortunately, there's places in the world right now where that's still happening.
Every day.
Every single day. And the children are being forced to work. And that's what we call slave labor. That is human trafficking. And they're like, oh, and then I pivoted it. I'm like, but we're in the United States and we live in a great country. And it was a full-on patriotism lesson after that.
Being exposed to the stuff that you're exposed to, does it add an additional? I mean, let's be honest. As a parent, I don't know if your worry meter could go any higher on, from the catastrophic to everything in between. Does it? I mean, you're spending your working hours swimming in a pool that's not exactly clear or chlorinated. Does it worry you for your kid's future?
No. It doesn't. I'm going to protect them, I'm going to protect them the best that I can and know how.
Which is probably going to be through knowledge, education, and preparation.
It's definitely making sure that they know that they're loved, that they're supported. They know what the dangers of things are out there. I mean, come on, like when you have your children when they were really small at the grocery store, be like, don't run away from me. If you get snatched up, you're never going to see me again. Or don't run across the street. You need to hold my hand. You're going to get hit by a car. You give your children the consequences of what their actions may be. Well, it's the same thing with the internet and talking to strangers. It's the same thing with, their internet, like how they perceive themselves on the internet, because that's where they recruit these days. That's where traffickers find their victims is on the internet. And they find young people who have a void that needs to be filled, whether it's loneliness, whether it's love, whether it's money. They are looking to fill that void, and that's how they know they can manipulate those young kids. So, I think Nick said it before. It's like, if it's too good to be true, then it is too good to be true and walk away. So, just properly teaching my children consequences of their actions through their whole life and talking to them bluntly about what's going on. Like, I'm talking to smaller kids about labor trafficking, but when they're in middle school and they understand sex, you need to start talking to them about sex trafficking. Like immediately.
Like I said, age appropriate. Maybe don't start the sex trafficking one at like age 7.
No, probably not.
With your oatmeal, let's talk about pimps.
No, let's not do that. Let's not do that. But when they're 12 or 13, and
I would say get ahead of that curve early for sure.
Yeah, and then talk to them responsibly about for men and young men, children, like for boys, the consumption of pornographic imagery as well, because there's also trafficking happening in pornography, and let them know what they're looking at. Yeah, so it's a healthy development mind thing when your 13-year-old you find those websites popping up and you immediately start blocking them. Yeah, but then you need for them to understand, one, that they're numbing their brain. Yeah. And two, that these people, this is not normal and it's not okay. So talking about that kind of stuff too with the guys and the boys, so that they know not to start buying girls. That's not something that you should do in life, because you don't know who you're buying.
Or even just as a general concept, it's just terrible.
It's a general moral concept, like the purchase. Yeah, no, it's not okay. So there's so many different ways you can approach it. Deliver Fund has some amazing resources on our website for parents to speak to their kids about human trafficking directly. And it's not like, hey, this is human. Sorry, I gotta say, I'm like, hey, this is human trafficking. It's, so do you have any friends at school that you might see around that have, really nice, purses or shoes that they shouldn't have? Or do you have a friend that lives out of a hotel? Like, do you have a friend that has an older boyfriend? Things like that. Because it's not always a kidnapping situation or a runaway situation. There's victims that are trafficked out of their own bedrooms. Like, they will lie to their parents and they will go out and they are being manipulated and they're being trafficked and they're living in their hometown while it's happening. And so it's, it's just being able to see the signs.
Again, hidden in plain sight.
In plain sight. I mean, there's something out there right now called sugaring, like sugar babies, right? And we're finding high school girls trying to get onto sugar baby websites to make money from sugar daddies so that they can go buy the Louis Vuitton or the Fendi so that they can keep up with the rich kids in school. And maybe on those sugar baby websites, well, one, they're lying because they're not over the age of 18. And it is a trafficking situation, especially if it gets sexual. But they don't know what they're opening themselves up to, because traffickers will go on those websites too and be like, she's willing to sell herself for a purse. I could get her to sell herself for something else as well. It's just a very, very dangerous slope. And so I have friends who have kids in high schools that were like, oh, we had this girl who was sugaring. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's bad. I'm like, she can't do that. I'm like,
that is my new term for the day.
Sugaring?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, it will lead to exploitation, especially with younger girls.
The desire, I want people to make whatever choices they want to in life. But the fact that for people that is something that they would willingly even want to consider, participate in, like, it's just a bridge too far for me.
So one of the survivors we work with, Tamaya Nagy, she always says this. I mean, she was trafficked, and she goes, no 5-year-old girl wakes up when she's 5 years old and goes, I want to do sex work when I grow up.
For sure.
Like, even the girls that are doing willingly now, I mean, it's a rough life. It is hard and it is dangerous. And so, it's like, it's scary, and especially with our culture and the over-sexualization of our, our media and whatnot. Like, I cannot listen to pop culture music half of the time because it is about trafficking, like, constantly, or something sexual. Like, it's just so bad. Like, I'll be working out at the gym and I'll be singing along to a song and then my brain starts listening to it and I'll be like, oh, can't listen to that anymore. It's so dirty. So
that's how you can condition a large swath of society, though.
You can, yeah, with music.
Yeah, just passive messaging. Or I guess
with
it's
movies.
Not even that passive.
No, it's not passive at all.
Yeah.
Like, even just like the way that pop culture and media portrays women, and they try to hold women up. There's this whole Me Too movement. But when it comes to the side of human trafficking, what causes it and what it looks like, they fully ignore that they're perpetuating a lot of it with, like, the over-sexualization of girls.
Yeah.
And how girls are spoken to and different things. And traffickers use that music. They use the music and they use the culture to lure and transform and manipulate their victims every single time. Yet it's on blast. It's being turned into a TikTok dance. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. Like, anybody who's on TikTok, I think it was like a year ago and we were all supposed to be stuck at home. It was no face, no case. And then it would flash and they would change clothes. No face, no case is pimp mantra, to not post your victims' faces on your social media so you don't get caught. No face, no case. That's their theory, but that's funny because that totally isn't true. I can still figure it out. And I will find that trafficker anyway. But you had teenage kids on TikTok going like, no face, no case, and then the flash.
Yeah.
And so they're like getting it ingrained into their brain that no face, no case is a cool lingo. No, it's about being able to sell other human beings without being arrested. And it's super frustrating.
How do you structure your day? You drop your kids off at school and then you just go after these fuckers?
Yeah, pretty. Drop my children off at school, then I go to the gym.
Yep.
And I work out for an hour, and then I just go straight to work. And
at a broad level, again, do not give away any of your secrets, because I want all these people to, like I said,
no
be burned
TTPs.
like
We're good.
Roman candles. How do you go about it? I mean, how have you been able to infiltrate the chat rooms and develop these relationships where you can have these direct interactions with people doing this, the traffickers themselves? How'd you find them?
Working with law enforcement is how I found them. Working directly with law enforcement and their leads and information, and it spider webs from there, right? And you just develop out these networks. And then I figured out ways to find them without law enforcement's help. And so finding those traffickers and working from where they post their victims. And like first and foremost, we always identify a victim first. And ensure that she's a victim, not an actual sex worker. We do not target sex workers. It's not what we do. We find that victim, and then we backtrack and find who her trafficker is, because the digital fingerprints are all over the victim online, right? We could see that information, and then we develop it out further. And we find as much information as possible. It's like if you touch, like as any person anywhere out there, if you touch the internet, like I'm able to find you. Like it's not hard for me to do with the tools and the databases and things that I have. How do I infiltrate it? I'm really, really good at pretending to be somebody else.
Once you get through that layer of security, if you will, for the traffickers, are they pretty open about what it is that they're doing? I mean, are they sharing like best practices?
So, yeah, all the time. Like, so there's different ways that I go at it. I can go at like how you would interact with a trafficker is just a different way in their life they'd be interacted with. And yeah, traffickers, even when I'm not interacting with a certain trafficker, they're still screaming it from the rooftops of how amazing they are as pimps and sharing what they're doing and where they're going and how they're doing it. They're very chauvinistic. There isn't a human trafficker that I've come across that isn't, a full-blown narcissist / sociopath.
Both male and female?
Male and the females. Yeah, the females that end up going full trafficker, they also, there's no empathy is the problem.
I was going to ask you if the female traffickers are more brutal than the male, especially the ones who kind of grew up in that system. I wouldn't be surprised if you said that they were.
They manipulate differently.
Yeah.
They manipulate differently than the males would, for sure. And then there's some females that are almost, they turn into the males themselves, and they just emulate everything that they've already learned. There is a point, and this is coming from law enforcement officers I've worked with, there's a point like, yes, she was a victim at one point in time, but when you move over to that dark side, it's very rare that you could come back and get out of what you're doing, right? And they're out there, and it's unfortunate, like that they're victim of their circumstances that they were put into. But then when you are selling other girls, you're a female, and you are making that girl go out and be raped. It's industrial rape, like 5 to 10 times a day, coming back and then taking her money, and then you decide what you're doing with that money. And most of the time it's buy yourself a Mercedes or whatever it may be. And if the girls are acting properly, you get them, you get them a new bathing suit or something like that. And it's like the traffickers themselves they think they're entrepreneurs, and they're trying to fund their lifestyle for the most part.
Yeah, it's just a means to an end.
Yeah, absolutely. And not a lot of them they don't have good money management skills. So I'm
so shocked to hear that.
They're pushing their girls out of Motel 6s, and they're making $6,000 a day, but they're making the girls work out of the seediest motels in town. And it's like, really? Or they're wearing a $20,000 grill in their mouth that they had made, and they're videotaping their victims walking into rooms with Johns, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, come on. There are some that are very financially savvy. They fly around in private jets. Their girls are being run at the top hotels and resorts in the world. They're driving around the nicest vehicles you could think of. They have multiple houses. somehow the IRS hasn't caught up to them, or they're trying to, right? Or they have multiple businesses and they're running their money through those businesses, so the IRS isn't going to properly catch them unless they're really looking hard enough. Dollar Fund's really, really good at helping find those financial trails and providing intelligence to point in the right direction for that, which is really important because when a trafficking victim ends up going to court, she has to testify against her trafficker, and that's really, really, really hard to do. And so, like, the whole goal is to find enough intelligence that the victim doesn't have to go up on the stand.
Never even goes that far.
It never even gets that far because the trafficker can't show a defense of what they're doing because their fingerprints are all over the fact that they sold this girl for money and she didn't get to keep it. And, ideally, like, we just don't want to put a trafficking victim through that again. Law enforcement doesn't want to either, and prosecutors hate putting trafficking victims on the stand because defense attorneys are evil and they'll tear them apart.
I feel like that'll be a rough ride.
It is a rough ride, and there is a survivor that is now a thriver who was one of the first victims that Deliver Fund assisted in her rescue, right? And she's now thriving. Her name's Dallas. Absolutely love her. And she went on, she was on the stand for 12 hours. Like, the defense attorney grilled her up and down. Her trafficker ended up going to federal prison, but she was a champ.
That's
absolutely.
a lot.
Yeah. What's worse is the trafficker himself used funds from her sales to fund his defense attorneys because the law enforcement agency at the time was not able to seize all the funds out of the bank account because it was too minimal. And because of her case, they changed that on the federal level so they could take a lower amount of funds so that the douchebaggery of the trafficker using, rape money to fund his defense can't happen, thankfully. It's absolute insanity.
It's hard to wrap your head around, to be honest, the size and scope and scale of what you're talking about. I cannot believe you're jumping into that swimming pool every day.
I compartmentalize. It's my superpower.
Okay.
My superpower is compartmentalization. Anybody who is in the military who's deployed knows how to compartmentalize.
Some better than others.
But you know how important it is, at least, to be able to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
So I'm really good at shoving it all into one corner and just forgetting about it and then turning around, playing with my kids, going on whatever. It helps to watch movies and go hiking.
Have you ever talked with a counselor or talked with somebody about, I don't know, the impact it may have on you to see this stuff day after day?
So Deliver Fund's amazing, and we have free counseling provided to us if we need it. I haven't utilized it. I go shooting and I go hiking and I watch movies.
Yep. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. I know myself, I would struggle given enough time to deal with interfacing with that at that level and seeing the reality on the ground. I personally would be like, I'm going to go ahead and have my head checked out a little bit, maybe offload someone.
Yeah.
That's me. That's why I was just curious. The hiking, the movies, the shooting, trust me, I get it.
I know it has an effect on me.
Yeah.
I know because personal relationships, I'm absolutely terrible at them. Just complete hogwash. I can't have a personal relationship these days. I've tried. It's just worthless.
Of any kind? Or what are you talking about?
So romantic relationships with guys, I've been single for 3 years and I'm just I don't need that. It's nope, I'm good. I'm so good at my work. I think sometimes I screw up. I'm not that good sometimes, but my work is my life. And so what I see and what I have to deal with at work, it's just easier not to have a personal life. I'm raising my kids. I raise my kids. I go to work.
Yeah. There's
those two separate things, and I compartmentalize them. And I'll tell you, there have been situations where I've worked operations, and you can't push it down anymore.
Yeah.
It just overflows, and I sit there and I'm you're just numb. Like, I can't look at it anymore. Like, I cannot look at the content anymore because the way girls are sold, they're sold in a pornographic way. And so if you're working operations, you're literally like looking at rape victims' pornography, like for hours and hours on end. Or I've done interviews. I haven't done them, but I've been present for interviews of survivors, and listening to that, like, I thought I was fine, and like I woke up the next morning and I was just like so emotionally heavy. I just started bawling and I couldn't figure out why.
It's a lot of weight.
It is, and it will come out somehow, which preferably through shooting guns and hiking and watching good movies. Like, knowing your outlets is really important, but there's some people who can't compartmentalize. Nick has had some people out of the soft community who are like, yeah, I want to do this. And then they get, like, Nick has described them as some of the most badass people he's ever known. We're just like, so, like, crazy stuff overseas, has seen crazy stuff overseas. And then when you describe this is how you do your work, this is what you have to work with, they're like, not in a million years, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of the guys are used to a more final solution. You know, they're used to not the find, fix piece. They want to finish. And you take that away from them, they're like, yeah, I don't like that job so much anymore.
So that's another thing is, like I said, you have to let go of your intelligence. You have to let go and move on. We do get to see it finish. But I just watched a case finish, and it took 4 years. It took 4 years for it to go through. The fastest I've ever seen it is 1 year.
Yeah,
the United States court systems, it's slow. And like, it's some of the biggest cases Deliver Fund worked 4 to 5 years ago are now just finally coming to fruition.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's really hard to like, it's hard to wait on that and see that, but we do get that finalization eventually.
Do you think you can keep going at this pace? 5 more years, 10 more years?
Man, I don't know. It's a really good question. It's a really good question. Nick and I had coffee yesterday. I think he kind of was trying to ask me the same question.
So, what are your thoughts on the future?
How are you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. But yeah, no, it's rough. I think also within Deliver Fund itself, I'm moving into like more senior leadership positions, and I'm teaching more than working on packages. I mean, every day I'm still working with law enforcement, but now I'm creating the army of Deliver Fund, right? And
that's the best thing you can do with your knowledge.
Building out the senior intelligence analysts, who are then building out more junior intelligence analysts, and be able to send them out there. Like, it's pretty cool. I have a couple jurisdictions that I specifically cover, and I have a couple cops that call me randomly, and I can't say no to them, even though I really should push them off to the right analyst. But to come in on a Monday and we have our ops briefing and hear all the amazing work that happened the last week, and I had no clue what was going on because we have analysts all over the country just absolutely crushing it. Right. They're doing amazing work. And then I go back and I look through like the operational, like the op orders and the different things, working with the law enforcement. And I look and I'm like, wow, like 3 years ago, I wrote that template for that op order. Cool. I'm like, they're still using it. Great. They're still using the methodology. They're still putting it together, because that's the thing is this target set was never formally developed out, and the workflows were never developed out before. So it's really, really neat to see successes off of people that I've trained. I think that makes me happier than when I catch a trafficker. I don't actually catch a trafficker, but the intelligence I've provided to law enforcement goes into catching the trafficker. I think it's more rewarding to see other people that I've worked with, like, find people that are smarter than me and then build them up, and then have them go find more people and then build them up. And I think that
force multiplier.
I think that's where 100% where I'm heading within the organization, which I don't get to sit around in seedy hotel rooms as much anymore with cops all day, even though that it is a lot of fun, because cops are absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
They're so much
They're
fun.
children.
They are.
Yeah.
And I love it. Well,
the ones I know, at least, if you spend enough time with them, like, oh, there it is. You guys are just fucking children.
Well, I mean, in a deployed environment, I was like around a bunch of children too. It's just where I'm comfortable.
I get it.
I'm comfortable with the man children running around being complete idiots, So, and I'm not saying they're not being idiots, but they say some of the funniest stuff. And then also our sense of humor is darker than dark, right?
Gallows, if you will.
Yes. And so I relate with law enforcement on that aspect. So working operations with my computer in the corner and stuff, those days are less and less, although I have something scheduled in the next couple of months and I got really excited. I'm like, yes, I get to go out.
So for people listening to you talk about what you do and the impact that it has, and they're hearing you say, I like training people. And they're like, well, I want to be trained by her. How do they do this? I feel like force multiplication is a very viable route to the potential solution for this problem. Where do they begin? How do they do this?
So the first thing that you can do is donate to Deliver Fund, because we cannot hire intelligence analysts without the proper funding, and Deliver Fund is a nonprofit.
Are you trying to say that Goodwill does not pay the mortgage?
Unfortunately, no. It does not. No, so, we would hire 100 people tomorrow if we had the funding to do it. We do slowly hire targeting analysts. And so people are listening and they're like, well, I don't have an intelligence background. I don't have a law enforcement background. And they're like, we're not necessarily looking for that. Does it help? Sure. But we're looking for analytical minds.
Yeah.
And so when we do hire people, we have a tryout. And the tryout is several different processes. Like first is like a questionnaire, and then there's other things that go behind that. And there's a step-by-step basis. And we're hiring certain people specifically. And it's funny, like some of the best hires we've made are like 20-year-old kids straight out of college that have no law enforcement, no military, no analytical experience, but their brains are like
perfectly tooled for the job.
They are, especially because we do a lot of social media exploitation, and they already know how to use social media.
Yeah, they're raised on it.
They're raised on it. And that's like a huge part of what we do is social media exploitation. So, it's, if you want to, like we don't have any job openings currently, but careers.
Good job, Nick. Real good job, Nick.
It's a careers.deliverfund.org, and you can throw your resume at it. And, when we go into that pool all the time, and we poll and we make calls and different things. And so like, that's how you can do it. Now, if you're like younger and you're like, well, I want to be from like an intelligence background, like something like that, go to school for it. Go to school for analysis. Go to school for whatever it may be in like the counter-terrorism world, even like you learn structures that are very important to intelligence analysis there. Like if you want to do like the best thing you can do is become a cop. So you can become a detective, become a criminal analyst, become an analyst in the federal government. You could become a lawyer and become a prosecutor and really, really go hard, right? You could be a therapist to do victim services, right? There's so many different ways that you could fight trafficking. If you want to work for Deliver Fund, when we are hiring, like you don't have to have any necessary skill set. You'll get a tryout if you make it through the first few stages of the interview process.
Fair. Where can people find you?
Me. So I am on Instagram at Cara_the_Huntress. And if you want to know what human trafficking looks like,
you do a pretty good job of putting it out there.
All that infiltration we've been talking about of me infiltrating the traffickers, I routinely shame them on my social media.
Do you ever, I was going to say, do they ever reach out to you directly?
There's only been one instance where a trafficker posted one of my videos on his website.
No
way. And it was really interesting because other traffickers underneath it, because it was like a meme page for traffickers, they do that. They have meme pages where they talk about how amazing they are and how to sell people. But I saw it, and then the comments underneath it were like, oh, she's NSA, she's FBI, don't mess with her. But then there were the comments, she's like, no, she's getting pimping and trafficking mixed up. And I'm like, no, I'm not. It's one and the same. So I took all the comments and then I posted them on my page. And I'm like, this is where you're wrong. This is where you're wrong. I'm like, yes, you should be afraid of me. Like, and I just turned it right back around on them. And I'm like, it's cool. It's fine.
Social media is so goddamn weird.
It is. It's really weird. But I mean, if you use it properly, right? Yeah. And especially within the veteran community, like I think social media can be used properly. And then also I think it could be used to our detriment. It can be used for community. What gets me is like as a female veteran, like I don't see a whole bunch of female veterans out there using social media except to like thirst trap. And it drives me up the wall because... Are
you talking about a camouflage or U.S. flag bikini?
Yeah, and all they're doing, I was like, I'm so happy you're in really great shape, but like you're really demeaning my cause here. It's like, that's great. I'm like, but you're so like, you're making it so hard for us, the ones that are out there that are trying to make a difference. And it's like, seriously.
To each their own with what they decide to curate their social media feed with.
Oh, it kills me. Some of it though, like I'm like a huge scroller of some stuff and I'll just go on for hours. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad.
I'm glad there are people like you out there who are using their skills and abilities for what it is that you're doing. Like I said, I sat down, had that first conversation with Nick, thinking I had a good idea of what human trafficking was. Which is probably how most people end their first conversation with Nick, if that's the subject matter. Like, oh, yeah, I was not really accurate in what I was thinking. And it's actually been something that has been on my mind since that conversation. Again, it's like you go through your life probably not seeing, not necessarily even just human trafficking, but then somebody points something out and it's impossible to not see or think about. That was the experience that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the veteran community, like for me, I'm 10 years out of my...
I'm almost there too.
I'm 10 years out, right? And there's so many people that are still holding on. I'm like, it's over, man. Afghanistan's going back to the Taliban. We're done. Yep. Like, this is the end of the line. And it's like, God, we have so many amazing people with so many skills. Stop falling back on the persona and then take those skills and push forward and do everything you can to contribute to this country because, oh gosh, we need it right now.
There's plenty of evil out there for those skills. Yeah, recalibrate a little bit, retool.
Yeah.
Point it in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. You just got to put your energy and your heart into it like you put your energy and heart into fighting terrorism. You can find other things to do that with. And even if it's not like fighting crime, like even in your local community, like go coach a soccer game, be a father figure to a kid who needs it on the soccer field even. Yeah. Like show some leadership, right? A lot of companies and organizations out there in our country, they don't like to hire veterans because of some of the personas that we perceive out there. Like you're a veteran,
or they've had a bad experience with one.
They have, yeah. I even, when I was in my drunken terminal leave stupor, I tried to get a job out in California. And it was on a program that I used while I was deployed, but I didn't have my college degree. And they straight out told me, we're not sure you're a veteran, even though you've used the tool. We want to go with somebody who has a 4-year degree at the time, which I have my degree now. But back then I was so mad. I'm like, you do know I'm going to go back to DC and make just the same amount of money without my degree with a clearance, yet you don't want to hire me on this side of the country because of my military experience doesn't fit that, right? I've had other friends who couldn't get jobs because of their veteran experience too. So let's change that. Let's change that mindset, right?
Well, it has to be changed on both sides. I'm sure there are organizations who are resistant to it, but then in my opinion, at least the biggest threat to the veteran community is veterans themselves. And it's amazing what one good experience or what one bad experience will have inside of organizations. It will either open many doors or slam all of them shut. So the problem, I think, is equal on both sides of that house. There's responsibility there for both parties.
There is. Yeah. There is. I know there's so many amazing veterans out there who are like ready to do good.
Yep. But you can't be a dipshit. That's
True.
the problem.
Yeah, you can. But you can be a dipshit in private when you hang out with your fellow veterans if you need to get it out of your
That's
system.
probably unavoidable, so that's definitely going to happen. But you don't have to be a dipshit professionally.
No.
And it's okay to not start every sentence with, when I was a Navy SEAL, or when I was in the team. It's like, it's okay to not say that. Or I was using that as an example of the community that I came from. I've heard many other people, when I was in the Army. Right? When I was like, fill in the fucking blank. Maybe just skip that.
Yeah. It's funny now these days. Like I think with Deliver Fund, like I'll mention like if it's in like a professional introduction, like so I was an intelligence analyst in the military. I went on to these 3-letter agencies. This is my background and this is what we do now. And if it's like a professional introduction, that's as far as I go.
Yeah.
But when I meet somebody for the first time and shake their hand, I go, "Hi, I'm Cara Smith from Deliver Fund." That's how I introduce myself because that's the organization I work for.
Yeah.
I don't go, "Hi, I'm Cara Smith. I'm a veteran."
Yeah.
Which is another thing. I'm a female. Like
Well, you might
nobody
not need
believes
to
me anyway.
because you might be wearing a shirt that says veteran. Right.
I saw a T-shirt last night.
And I'm making fun of the guys who literally wear camo still every day.
I saw
Thank me for my service if you want to, but you better.
I saw the best T-shirt last night. I was at the rodeo, and it was an American flag, and it said "Alias Salim Air Base." I'm like, you actually bought the T-shirt?
Son of a bitch. Yeah, that
You
should
bought the
have
T-shirt.
been burned in the burn pit at the airbase.
I was like, I should have taken a picture. I was like, is that? I was like, one, it's Alias Salim. Nobody wants to claim they actually spent time there ever.
This is true. This is accurate.
It's like, even if you pass through, you don't say that you actually passed through.
Well, like I said, I am so thankful that there are people like you out there who are doing what you do. I'm going to do everything I can to try to continue to support you and Nick and Deliver Fund. I think giving people a target for their energy, it helps, to retool and repurpose or find a different purpose. I do think the veteran community, some jobs, not all of them, are great tooling for the stuff that you guys do. I don't know. I think it makes a huge difference. I'm proud to support it. And I can't thank you enough for actually coming down and rapping with me. I'll let you get on with your day and enjoy Montana. It's like we've been at this for 2.5+ hours.
Yeah, there's still 5 hours of daylight left. We're good to go.
That is true. You have plenty of daylight. Don't get eaten by a grizzly bear, which I heard a woman just got pulled out of her tent not too long ago and was eaten.
Yeah, no, I won't let that happen. Thank you so much for your support and having me on and supporting our organization. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm just waiting for that target package from you, Nick, for the door for me to go kick in. I'm just joking. I won't do it. But I might. All right, thank you.
On the west bank of the river. That's A firm, west bank. It gives me Hill. Hill, give it to me in the grove. Okay, one's in from the north. I've got the west bank of the river. Two's going to give it to you in the grove. Roger, give me that gun run. Right along that bag, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, whether you're listening on an audio-only platform or you're watching on YouTube. I appreciate that you take the time every week to tune in. People ask me a lot, what can they do to help me spread the word? And the answer is actually embedded in the question. The biggest thing you guys can do to help me, if you enjoy the podcast and you think it would be helpful to others, is subscribe and share it with other people. And if you have the time, go on to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and a review. If you think the podcast sucks, tell me it sucks and leave a 0-star review or the lowest stars possible. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can go to clearedhotpodcast.com. And there is a contact me button right there, which will land in my inbox. And the last thing, if people are interested in helping out, what you can do is fly the old flag. And by that, I don't mean an actual flag, because I don't have any of those. I'm talking about t-shirts or sweatshirts or hats, whatever it may be. Again, clearedhotpodcast.com. Click on the shop tab, and hopefully something in there looks like it would be an item you would like to wear around town. And then you can tell people what it is when they ask you. But that is it. The biggest thing I can say is thank you. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, see you.